We'll start the December 8th, 2016 Metropolitan Planning Commission meeting. I appreciate you guys coming and the commissioners. We are on item B, the adoption of the agenda. Has everybody reviewed the agenda? Any additions, edits? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We're on item C, approval of the November 10th, 2016 and the November 17th, 2016 minutes. And those were mailed out earlier to you all to review. Any additions, edits? Is there a motion to adopt those particular agenda items? A second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We're at council members. I didn't see any. Y'all help me look for them. If they come in, we'll recognize the council members. That's rare. We don't have any council members here. Keep moving real quick. We'll go before they start talking. I'm just kidding. Item E, items for deferral, please. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Items for deferral or withdrawal. Item 1A, 2016 CP-002-001, a request to amend the Parkwood Union Hill Community Plan by changing to T3 Suburban Mixed-Use Corridor Policy on a portion of properties located at 4045 Dickerson Pike. This is on page 5. Item 1B, the related case, 2016 SP-089-001, a request to rezone from CS and RS20 to SPMU zoning on properties located at 4045 Dickerson Pike to permit an organized camp. On page 5, item 5A, 2016 SP-081-001, a request to rezone from SCN to SPMU zoning for property located at Old Hickory Boulevard to permit a mixed-use development. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. The related case 5B, starting on page 6, 95P-009-001, a request for cancellation of a planned unit development overlay district on property located at Old Hickory Boulevard. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Item 8, 2016 S-160-001, redivision of Lot 1 of Georgeboro Subdivision, Lot 81, Maple Home Track. A request for final plat approval to create 2 lots at 1003 Curdwood Boulevard. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Item 9, 148-81P-001, a request to revise the preliminary plan for a planned unit development overlay located at 201 Grizzard to reduce the amount of mobile home units. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Item 14, 2016 Z-024TX-001, on page 7, a request to amend the zoning code pertaining to sidewalks. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 Commission meeting. Item 15, 2016 Z-025TX-001, a request to amend the zoning code pertaining to maximum glazing requirements in certain single and 2-family residential zoning districts. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 2016 Planning Commission meeting. Item 17, 2016 SP-083-001, 50 Music Square West, a request to rezone from ORI to SPC zoning on property located at 50 Music Square West to permit a hotel and restaurant. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 26th Planning Commission meeting. Item 19A, 2016 SP-090-001 on page 8 of your packet. A request to rezone from MUN to OL to SP-C zoning on properties located on Old Hickory Boulevard to permit a self-service facility at a maximum height of 4 stories. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 26, 2017 meeting. The related case, item 19B, 2004P-021003, a request to cancel a PUD district on property located on Old Hickory Boulevard. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 2016 Planning Commission meeting. Item 21, 2016 SP-095-001, Clay Street Properties, a request to rezone from OR20 to R6 to SPMU zoning on properties located on Clay Street, Dominican Drive, and 4th Avenue to permit a hotel. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th, 2017 meeting. Item 22, 2016 SP-098-001, rezone from SP to SP zoning on properties located on Cleveland Street and North 2nd Street to permit uses limited to single-family or 1 two-family unit per parcel. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 26th meeting. Item 23, 2016 S-255-001 on page 9 of your packet. A request for final plat approval to create 4 lots on property located at 2686 Hartford Drive. Staff recommendation is deferral to the January 26th meeting. Item 26, 2016 Z-035PR-001, a request to rezone from IG to MULA on 93 Taylor Street. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 26th meeting. On page 10 of your packet, item 29, 2007 SP-150-001, a request to amend an SP for properties located on Tulip Grove Road and Valley Grove Road to permit 340 units. Staff recommendation is to defer to the January 12th Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you. Commissioners, you've heard the items for deferral. Let's go through these really slowly, make sure I'm correct.
Okay.
And that way, nobody gets confused. So items 1A, 1B, 5A, 5B, 8, 9, 14, 15, 17, 19A, 19B, 21, 22, 23, 26, and 29. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion?
Motion to defer.
There's been a motion to defer, second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the deferral, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Those items are deferred. We're on to item F, consent agenda.
As information for our audience today, if you are not satisfied by a decision made by the Planning Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all the procedural requirements are met, please be advised that you should contact individual legal counsel. Notice to the public. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. Consent agenda items. Item 3, 2015 SP-099-001 on page 5 of your packet. A request to rezone from R6 to SPR zoning for properties located at 105 and 107 DeMoss Road. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item 4, 2016 SP-080-001, Wingrove and Byram multifamily, a request to rezone from R6 to SPR zoning on properties located at 431 Wingrove and 2150 Byram to permit up to 83 residential units. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item 10A, 2004 P-032-001 on page 6 of your packet. A request to amend a planned unit development overlay for property located at 1497 Chadwell Drive to permit an additional 13 multifamily residential units. The staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions, subject to the approval of the associated zone change, and disapprove if the associated zone change is not approved. The related case, item 10B, 2016 Z-131 PR-001, a request to rezone from RM4 to RM6 zoning for property located at 1497 Chadwell Drive. Staff recommendation is to approve. On page 7 of your packet, item 11, 2016Z-101PR-001, a request to rezone from RM20 to MHP zoning for a portion of property located at 1343 Dickerson Pike. Staff recommendation is to approve. Item 16 on page 7 of your report, 2016 SP-066-001, a request to rezone from RS5 to SPR zoning for properties located on Delaware Avenue to permit up to 16 residential units. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item 18 on page 8 of your packet, 2016 SP-086-001, a request to rezone from R80 to SPR zoning on property located at 7897 Old Charlotte Pike to permit all uses permitted by R80 and a kennel, only permitted with issuance of a special exception permit by the BZA in accordance with the development standards. Item 20, 2016 SP-094-001, 6370 Ivy Street, SP, a request to rezone from R8 to SPR zoning on property located at 6370 Ivy Street to permit up to 4 residential units. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions. Item 25, 2016 Z-134PR-001 on page 9 of your report. A request to rezone from R8 to RM20A zoning on properties located at W Trinity Lane. Staff recommendation is to approve. Item 27, 2016 Z-137PR-001 on page 10. A request to rezone from MUL to MULA zoning on properties located on Martin Street. Staff recommendation is to approve. Item 28, a request to apply a contextual overlay district to various properties along Colbert Drive and Shadow Lane. Staff recommendation is to approve. Under other business on page 10, the employee contract renewal for Kyle Lambert. 31 is a request to waive the public notice requirement for the East Nashville Community Plan Amendment, and item 35 to accept the director's report and approve administrative items. Pardon me. And if you go to your agenda on page 4, you will note at the bottom of the consent items that the employee contract renewal for Kyle Lambert is item 30. These are administrative items. The next one on 30, the correct is 31 for the request to waive the public notice requirement for the East Nashville Community Plan, and 35 is to accept the executive director's report and administrative items.
All right, so you heard. Yes, ma'am.
The very last item, can you pull that off consent?
The executive report.
Are they admin items?
Well, generally we don't, as you know, we generally don't pull that item off the consent. Thank you for asking, though. On the consent agenda, items 3, 4, 10A, 10B, 11, 16, 18, 20, 25, 27, 28, and then there's items 30, not 29, which is the employee contract, item 31 instead of 30, which is the request to waive public notification, and the item 35 now, not 34, which is the director's report. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Motion to set these on consent.
There's been a motion to accept.
I'd like to ask a question, if I might.
Yes, ma'am. Council lady.
Just if there may have been an explanation somewhere, but I missed it on why we're waiving the public notification requirement for the East Nashville Community Plan Amendment.
We'll hand it over. What is Ms. Staff?
I can take that.
Thank you.
I'm Catherine Withers with the Community Planning Division. With the amount of zone changes that were coming in District 5 that were not consistent with policy, staff felt that we needed to go out and meet with the community to make sure that they were in support of the changes that were coming. So 2 of our staff members worked with different community organizations to come out to meetings that were already being held and worked with neighborhood leaders to notify constituents that we were coming out to these meetings. And so we did find, in many cases, the communities were in support of changing to neighborhood evolving. We do have one area that would like to change from evolving to maintenance. So we do plan to notify those property owners. But because we've done this extensive outreach and going to the different neighborhood organizations, we would like to waive the notices, which would be 5,500 notices that we weren't anticipating in our budget.
I appreciate that. So just to be clear, you will send notices to the one area where you're talking about making a change?
Well, we are making changes, but it would take away, I mean, neighborhood evolving and envisions their area changing and possibly, rezonings to higher intensity. So a change to neighborhood maintenance would essentially keep it as it is.
Okay.
So we do want to notify those property owners. But we will we have an email list of people who have attended the meetings, and we'll continue to work with the council members and community leaders to make sure that notice is going out that way.
That way, okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilor, just to emphasize what Catherine just said, and that is that our Community Plans Division already went to a lot of community meetings and met with the community on these issues, and we found that they were broadly in support of this. And the ones that we're focusing on where there is intensity, where it's changing so that it's increasing the community plans, minding you that's not rezoning anything, but changing the community plans in those areas we are giving notice.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on discussion? So let's go through it one more time, just so everybody knows. Number 3, number 4, 10A, 10B, 11, 16, 18, 20, 25, 27, 28, and then the 3 last items were just changed by one number, so it's now items 30, 31, and 35. Any other discussion? There's been a proper motion and second. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. So just for everyone, all the commissioners and the public, we are going to be considering for public hearing items number 2, 6, 7, 12, 13, 24A, and 24B. Did I miss any? Just have those on your list. But before we get started, I did see a councilman come in, Mr. Jeff Syracuse. Would you like to speak now or during your item? Thanks for coming down. We thought we got off easy today with no council members.
Amen. I just wanted to briefly speak in favor of the Music Row detailed design plan as someone who has a kind of a unique perspective, I guess, from working on Music Row for the past 18 years in Donaldson, forming a neighborhood association, and then bringing kind of all those together also now as a council member. I've seen these folks work very hard together, and it's a good plan. You all have worked hard on it, the department has, and so I encourage you all to support it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman. And so now we are open for public hearing here for the presentation, item 2.
Well, good afternoon. Stephanie McCullough with Community Plans to present item 2 on your agenda, an amendment to the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan. This request is to amend the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan by applying special policies in the Music Row detailed design, outlined in the Music Row detailed design plan. Staff is recommending approval of this plan. Just a little bit of background. Well, planning staff started working with the community in October of 2015 on these processes. We've had 5 community meetings through this from October till this date. Prior to that, we were working with the National Trust for Historic Preservation on their work documenting the area, and later on coming up with a report about a music industry cultural district. Some things that are not quite tied to land use, but actually are part of the issues that arose from the work in the area. As part of our process, we came up with 5 guiding principles that are also kind of reflected in the district plan. Preserve Music Row's character. We understand that that's not necessarily a physical building, but that can be the culture, the atmosphere, some of the stories that are behind what happens there. Reuse of existing buildings when possible. Managing tourism. There's a lot of tourists that come through that can, in some ways, be disruptive of the regular business of the recording studios. So we've been looking at ways to identify places for them to congregate, or and with working with the National Trust on a tour that's been worked to go through some of the music recording studios in the area. Encourage creativity and collaboration. That's one thing that we heard on a regular at every meeting about how this is a collaborative space, and one of the things that's important is having the different scales of uses so that people can come together and work back and forth on different things. And of course, preserve and enhance the streetscape, which is what we do as planners to make sure that the streetscape is inviting and at a neighborhood scale. The policies that are in place currently are T5 Center Mixed-Use Neighborhood at the northern portion of the study area, which is outlined in the dark black line. District office concentration, which is the lighter blue that's kind of down the middle, and there's open space at the northern point and at the southern point of the district concentration area. We're proposing a new policy in this area, the transition policy, and I'll go through and explain each one of these in just a moment. So the T5 Center Mixed-Use Neighborhood policy is, its intent is for high-intensity mixed-use areas that are also key employment centers, much as you would know that Midtown is currently. Midtown is a home for any number of heavy industries, including the music industry and healthcare, so that's one of the more intense areas of town and of the study area. District office concentrations intent is to preserve, enhance, and create districts where office use is predominant and where communities for complementary uses are available. This is the one policy we felt was most reflective of the type of uses in Music Row, and so that's the one that's been in place since we've used the transect. Open space, of course, intended to preserve and enhance existing open space based on the transect in which it's located. So these are context-sensitive open spaces. We have the one at the northern portion of the study area, and there's one to the south that's we've seen as underutilized. And then, of course, transition that we talked about on that area that's adjacent to the Edge Hill neighborhood is intended to preserve, enhance, and create areas to service transitions between higher and lower intensity of uses. So one thing that we've noticed is, through the analysis, is that the Music Row neighborhood serves as a transition in and of itself from the intense areas of Midtown and Vanderbilt into the lower scale, single-family Edge Hill neighborhood. So the Music Row area itself is a transition, but in addition to that, there's a transition area that is cognizant of that residential area. So here's the study area as it breaks down of the proposed special policies. As you can see, there are areas outlined in gray that are part of the Midtown study that was conducted in 2012 and amended in 2014 and then readopted as part of Nashville Next. We felt that those areas had been studied recently enough that there didn't need to be any changes in those. To the north, this north portion in dark red is at a 20-story maximum, and then it steps down as you move closer to Wedgwood and closer to Edge Hill from 8 to 5 to 3 stories, with the transition area as a 5-story area that has an additional transition language for the rear portion of those properties to be cognizant of the alley that runs between the Edge Hill neighborhood and Music Row. So as I said, the first section is the tallest, most intense. It's around the roundabout at Music Row. It fits largely in with the context of what is already going on with the Midtown study and what development is going on in that area. We have different heights and setbacks for some of the streets in the area, mainly because of their use classification. Broadway is considered a primary street, and it's a much wider street that would accommodate a taller building to frame the sidewalks. Division is a little less so, I'm sorry, McGavick is the smallest, or next, and then Division being the smallest after that. This next section, a maximum height of 8 stories that also ties into the 8-story area of the Midtown study. And one of the reasons for this height is because of the smaller lot sizes and the transition into a more residential area. And then we go, of course, into the 5-story area, with a front build-to of 15 to 20 feet, as well as the area above that. One thing that the community talked about was they liked the idea of the neighborhood residential feel and of the large setbacks that are established in the area. As many of you know, that the areas have, many of the businesses are in bungalows with these large setbacks because this area was a residential area. So trying to find a balance between that residential feel and the commercial uses that are in the area. So the last section within district office concentration has a height of 3 stories and a larger step back that's more in context of what's going on in that area, and then the South Music Row neighborhood conservation that is immediately south of that. That, again, is one area that had been established and we decided should remain as is. And then the transition area adjacent to the the neighborhood maintenance area of Edge Hill with a height of 5 stories along 16th Avenue, with a setback to 3 stories after 3 stories at the rear with a 15-foot step back on the back of the building with an additional 20-foot setback from the alley, again, to give more of a protection against that, or a buffer between the commercial uses and the residential. As we do with a number of these plans, we classified each of the streets within the area as hierarchically: primary streets, secondary, tertiary streets, and alleys, well, tertiary and local streets. So the primary streets, of course, are the more intense ones, 16th and 17th Avenue within the area. They have the most traffic. We've decided that at the northern portion, of course, have the more shallow build-to zones. The area, these streets we would like to keep the curb cuts and breaking of the sidewalk streetscape to a minimum. So on the secondary streets, you can have moderate development with vehicular access to parking in some areas. But of course, tertiary and local streets would be more suitable for those kind of breaks in the sidewalks. And then one thing that's unique about this area is that the alley system almost serves as another local street system. So we would encourage that development in this area would accommodate the standards of the 20-foot standards required in alleys. Okay, so in conclusion, we've had 8 some odd community meetings, 17 stakeholder meetings to talk about what people wanted in this area. We encourage continued collaboration with partner agencies, communities, and nonprofits to determine the next steps, because again, a lot of the issues that have come up as part of this conversation are not necessarily land use issues, but there are other things that we can do based on what we've got in the land use and the policy that we've set up here that can to accommodate those conversations. Implementation of the policy as we've outlined it would be through rezoning. Staff suggests an SP for each rezoning in the area so that we can make sure that the development matches the wishes of the community as well as the guidelines in the detailed design plan. And staff anticipates continued work with the community on tools to implement this, as well as, which would be a form-based zoning tool perhaps, that would balance the preservation and growth in the area.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we'll declare this item open for public hearing. And Metro is actually the applicant, the Planning Commission. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time. And I do want to say, before we get started, that I really appreciate your hard work on this, Stephanie, and the staff. You guys I almost feel bad about working all this hard. So I do really appreciate all your hard work on this issue. So we'll just go ahead and, since we're the applicant, that's the presentation. And so we'll go ahead and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in support of it. You can come forward and you have 2 minutes to address the commission. Come on up. 2 minutes each. And welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hey there.
And please state your name and your address.
I'm John Dotson. I'm the founder of the Music Row Neighborhood Association. My home address is 3505 Central Avenue. First, the Music Row Neighborhood Association's primary mission is to preserve the legacy of Music Row. And sometimes that means saving buildings, and many times it does not. My personal connection is I spent 30 years in the music business and spent most of my career on Music Row, so I have a very strong connection to it. So in the end, for us, it's more about what happened there than where it happened. Frankly, there's not a lot of architecture worth saving on Music Row, but we do support healthy development and strong property owner rights. We understand that the design plan that's before you all is something that's going to help set the stage for the construction of a Music Row code. We have been through this process with Doug and Stephanie and Catherine and have learned a lot, frankly, in the process, thanks to them. That's why I can say that we understand where we're going with the Music Row code. We support the platform, the primary intent of the design plan, but clearly it's going to be putting the details in place to put the wheels on that engine. And as we move forward into the code, our primary concern here is the composition of the design review committee. And as long as it's based on stakeholder rights and the points of view of the neighborhood association, we support that because we can see how that can be of benefit in a large scale. I think it's also important for us to say, as a neighborhood association, how much we appreciate and respect our partners in the process, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, particularly Carolyn Brackett and Robbie Jones. The data that they have found has deeply enriched our understanding of our own history, how we can remember it, and how we can share it. And obviously, they're the folks that make the determination of NR and NRE properties. What we need above all else on Music Row is Class A high-rise office space. That's why music businesses are leaving Music Row. And our primary concern here, as we move down the road, is traffic, parking, and infrastructure. And we're going to stay on the concept of having that evaluated as we go into that, because that's what makes sense to us. Our primary concerns about NR and NRE are this. Things that are NRE are on a list where our friends and neighbors with the trust have said through their research, this is a property that should get some more consideration as a valuable property. But the point is that that's not something that the property owner solicited. And then when you move out into NRE being also something that affects the adjacent properties, the footprint spreads pretty quickly. Right now, there are more than 60 properties on the NRE property list. So if you just look down Music Row, that could potentially affect more than 200 properties. And that's a really significant portion of the entire footprint of Music Row. We support the initiative of the stakeholders in the conservation overlay to have that re-examined. A petition has been signed by most of them, and what they would prefer, as we do, is that the entire Music Row is governed by one code. I live in a neighborhood that has a conservation overlay. I'm a real estate agent. I do understand what a conservation overlay is, but I really want to emphasize the Music Row Neighborhood Association stands behind those folks that are asking for that to be re-examined. We are otherwise in support of the Music Row design plan, and we look forward to working with planning, as we've done up to this point, to design the review committee, or the design review committee. We need affordable office space on Music Row to grow offices. And we're also looking forward to working with zoning and codes about some potential revisiting of codes and zoning that would allow for some more retail space in the Music Row footprint so that we enhance the tourist experience of Music Row and that we also enhance our revenue base to the city. It's one of the things that I'm not sure has been done particularly well, and hopefully what we've accomplished here by establishing the Neighborhood Association is we're a body that everybody can work with to figure out how to do that best. And last but not least, I really want to thank Stephanie McCullough for all of her hard work on this. We're going to miss you. Thank you.
Thank you. And just procedurally, our rules allow for somebody that represents an association 5 minutes. That's why, and individuals too. So come on up, individuals. 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Grant Mullins. I represent Historic Nashville. I come today also to say that we are supportive of the new design plan, and we know that's taken a lot of work, as others have stated. But thank you to the commissioners and the staff and the council people who have been involved with creating that. We know it's been a long process. That being said, we are also concerned that this is a first step. As the previous speaker mentioned, we have the meeting scheduled to go forward about a new Music Row code. We're excited about those. We want to build on this design plan so that Music Row remains the historical, cultural, significant landscape it is today. I would say that in addition, given that the temporary hold on development in this area is terminating, and now that this design plan is going to be implemented, we anticipate a slew of SP requests and a lot of people who want carve-outs and exceptions. And that's what we're concerned with moving forward. We're afraid that if people come in and we start eroding this design plan that so many different stakeholders and government officials have spent so much time creating, it's only as good as how effective it can be and how much it's enforced. And so we're concerned that there might be a lot of requests coming in recent days and weeks and months about getting rid of some of those setbacks, about making high-rise exceptions. We really encourage the commission and the staff to go through those requests very carefully so that we're making sure that now that Nashville has started to do things like this design plan, which is a comprehensive approach, which is the great way to go, that comprehensive approach is only as good as it's enforced. And so we really encourage all of you here who are making those policy decisions to look at those exception-based requests very carefully. Nashville for so long has been a zoning exception-based town to the extent that isn't really replicated in cities of our size around the country. And so we are very hopeful that this is a great first step and very thankful that this is going in. We think it's a great idea. So we do encourage the adoption of the plan. And just in closing, I would say, while that conservation overlay is still present, I realize there are some stakeholders there who want it removed. There are others who don't, and our organization also does not want that overlay removed. So if that comes up moving forward through the process, please be mindful that there are organizations and stakeholders who want that conservation overlay to stay in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Tom White. I'm an attorney with Toon Intricate and White, 315 Dedrick Street. Represent Jerry Bradley and Tom Collins, who are significant property owners and have had a presence in Music Row for some time. My comments are, first of all, complimentary to the staff. Stephanie McCullough and the group have met at least at 5 major meetings out there in Midtown and many other meetings, an untold number of calls, and that's been very much appreciated from people that have got a real interest in ownership in the property in the area. I would comment that in the conclusion that the staff has presented, they really have identified items that I think the first 2 speakers have commented about, my clients totally agree with. The first one is that the desire to allow the music industry to remain a key component to the area and to have the opportunity to evolve and grow outweighs the desires for historic preservation, although the detention of character is a high priority. The key is, I think has been repeated throughout, it's the music that's historic there. It's the people that made the music. It's not so much the buildings. The comment continues, this history in this area is not explicitly tied to the architectural character of the buildings, and save for a few dedicated property owners, there's not a strong desire on the part of stakeholders or property owners to preserve the existing structures. I can't say that any clearer. That's the guts of what I think you've heard from everybody that's come to this mic before me. It's repeated by my clients. The combination of the music and the character are the critical things, not an architectural-driven matter. The last thing I'll comment about is this commission put a pause in this area in February of 2015. It's almost been 2 years, and it's time to basically let this matter move forward. At that time, the commission decided they would disapprove or they would defer any rezoning requests. That 2 years is almost up. It's time to basically put this into action. So thank you for your courtesies. Urge you to approve this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
I'm happy to wait for you.
Okay, yeah, Councilman, we'll D at the end if that's okay. Yep. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? We're at the end, Councilman. Oh, wait a sec. Hold on, Councilman. Come on up. Sorry, we try not to rush.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Come on up.
I'm getting older, so I move slower. My name is Tom Baker. I own property located at 1504 17th Avenue South. I am speaking because my property is not located within the Music Row detailed design plan. My property is located within the South Music Row Conservation Zoning Overlay. This overlay was adopted in 1997. It was adopted when Stuart Clifton was the councilman of this district. Its purpose was to protect the neighborhood, which it has done until now. I purchased my property in 1996. My property is a major asset and will be needed for my retirement. In the past several years, the value of my property has stagnated, while the properties outside of the overlay, a couple of blocks away, have increased greatly in value. A similar size residential property on Villa has a higher value than my office building on 17th. While the planning department started the Music Row design process, a group of the owners started contacting other owners in the overlay. We contacted 64 out of the 79 owners in the overlay, and 89% of those owners contacted have signed a petition asking for the removal of the overlay. The last block of 16th and 17th before reaching Wedgwood is the overlay area. This area is a part of Music Row. I am asking the commission to replace the South Music Row Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay with the Music Row Detailed Design Plan so the owners in the overlay have the same protection and growth potential as our fellow neighbors on Music Row. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Councilman?
Thank you, Commission, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for letting us be here. I wanted to speak. I spoke with Councilman O'Connell, who had been out of town, and we spoke right before, actually, I walked in today. So he wanted to echo his support of what's before you today. This has been a long process. It has been a process that's been very engaging. I wanted to thank the Music Row Neighborhood Association and the associated neighbors who've been really patient and asked a lot of very good questions throughout this process. I think it is evidence that this is a first step. I think everybody acknowledges that. What this does allow, however, are guidelines that we haven't had prior. It answers some questions I think that people have had about what their property rights may be. It increases entitlements in several instances as part of the overlay. The district I represent, most, if not all, except for maybe a few properties that are parking lots, stays pretty much the same as far as entitlements are concerned. Councilman O'Connell represents an area where entitlements tend to increase. Like I said, we are both in agreement. We think this is a good step in moving forward. This conversation, as it moves forward, is going to get, I think, a lot more difficult, to say the least. I think we're going to have a real conversation about what it is about preservation, form versus use, about what is important on Music Row, what makes Music Row, and how we do that in a way that honors the history of Music Row and preserves its future. So as you make this decision today, please know that I think we're going to have a lot more decisions to make on Music Row in the years ahead, and I really want to thank the planning staff, especially Stephanie, for doing the work that's gotten us to this point, and I look forward to working with you as we go forward.
Thank you, Councilman. Hello.
Hi.
Come on up. I'm sorry I didn't.
No, that's okay.
If everyone,
I didn't
if
move
y'all,
fast enough.
if y'all would do me a favor, though, if you want to speak in opposition, come on up and line up. That way we know. So thank you. Please state your name and your address. And
My
you'll have
name
2
is
minutes.
Helen Gore, and I own property at 1614 17th Avenue South in the South Music Row Conservation Overlay. We are not in opposition of the overlay. We want to be included in the overlay if we possibly can in the Music Row design plan. Mr. Clifton, if you remember, you were our councilman in around 1997, you remember. And we as a community requested of you that we be converted to a commercial zone. We at that time were a lot of illegitimate offices, multifamily homes, and a few residential properties. You agreed, but you said your response was the only option for my endorsement to a commercial zone was to apply a conservation overlay. We had no idea what a conservation overlay, what it was at that time, nor what the effect would be. We are aware of the implications of this zone in our specific area, and after living with this for 20 years and paying much higher property taxes, we feel as though we were misled as to the net effects of the overlay for our particular area. So we designed a second petition just recently, and as Tom mentioned, there's 79 properties at the south end of Music Row. And we were able to speak with 64 homeowners. 84% of those property owners want to be out of the conservation overlay and exchange it for the overall Music Row design plan. We appreciate very much Stephanie's and the planning department's work toward this, and we want to be part of it. The primary objections, the overlay, were as follows from the neighborhood. The overlay brings multiple layers of regulations. It is proven to be costly and time-consuming process. Property values have remained unchanged for the past 2 decades in our particular area, while the rest of Music Row has continued to appreciate. That's all I can say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do I have a minute more?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Okay.
I'm sorry.
We appreciate your discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kara Owen, and we have a property at 702 18th Avenue South. It's where 18th almost meets Division. And I agree with certain aspects of the plan. I think they've done a great job and a lot of research. There are a couple of things that concern me and my family, and I'm a real estate agent, so I know the real estate side of things. And one of the concerns is limiting our section of the street to 8 stories when across the street and all around us is 20 stories. The Virgin Hotel will be directly behind our building, and it's 13 stories. So from a real estate perspective, it dramatically decreases our property value with the investors that are coming to town and wanting to build larger structures. I know the lots are small, but if you combine with lots next to you, it dramatically decreases your property value. So I think that needs to be reevaluated, and the National Registry and National Registry eligible concerns me as a property owner as well. It dramatically decreases what we can do with our property. It should be up to the property owner to decide if it should be on the National Registry, and just because it's eligible, you shouldn't have to limit what you can do with your property. We pay $13,000 a year in property taxes, and to be told what we can do with our property is just a big concern. And the properties that are next to ours, simply because it's eligible, that part needs to be reviewed as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed.
Can I take a moment?
Oh, absolutely.
Since I'm the applicant.
Mr. Director, you have not gotten
Department's the applicant.
You haven't gotten your 10 minutes, so.
You have my 2 minutes? I just continue. First of all, I wanted to say that, when we started this exercise, I don't think any of us realized where we would get throughout the process. And I personally have wavered back and forth towards more preservation, towards allowing more development, as we've sort of uncovered each layer of this opportunity, not problem, that our community has a very unique place on Music Row, both historically, the way that it operates, but also it's important as an industry that's in this community. I didn't truly understand the weight of the industry until I actually spent some time of both with all the information that Stephanie's been able to uncover. I also had a unique opportunity to meet with Vanderbilt recently, and they pointed out how much Nashville weighs in the music industry nationally. But also just the sheer number of businesses that are on Music Row that are thriving businesses. I did not have a full understanding of, as I said, the sheer number that was there. And so that made me a lot more, and I think all of us at the planning department, a lot more sensitive to the industry there, that it is not just about the industry, nor is it just about the historic preservation, but trying to find that balance that allows an industry to grow, an industry that, quite frankly, is at a real crossroads in how it's going to look over the next few years and certainly next decade, and making sure that we don't do anything that inhibits that growth and that it continues to encourage it in that area. And so that really was a bigger part of the factor of what we came up with than I anticipated at the beginning of the exercise. Also, the work that was done by the National Trust, and I think that John Dotson pointed this out, the information that they were able to give us as a community as a whole has been incredible. They went out and met with people, as you've all heard, one-on-one, and uncovered a lot of great history that we didn't know that also really helped to inform the decision. So, one, I want to applaud the Commission for setting us on this path almost 2 years ago now. And I just want to remind you that when we started down this path, the goal was to not allow development to happen in a haphazard way. The goal was to get a community conversation going and to have an intentional way to grow in that area of our community. That was the goal. It wasn't just about historic preservation. It wasn't just about the industry, but it was, let's make sure that whatever we're doing as we move forward, that we do it in a thoughtful way and that we understand why we're headed in that direction. And I think that the staff's recommendation on the changes of policy reflects that.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I also want to say thank you to our former Chairman McLean, who set us down this path. So about that, we'll make sure everybody gets thanked, and the staff for sure. So we'll go ahead and start with Jessica. You want to go first? Vice Chair?
Sure. My first set of questions that came up probably fall into that bucket of not necessarily those that we guide with land use. But one of the things, one of the sentences that caught my eye was the same one that was pointed out a moment ago about the fact that the history is not explicitly tied to architectural character of the buildings, which I can totally understand. But I think when you think about that mixture of business owners and the type of businesses that can make use of that different type of space, you develop a community and a synergy, and that's what creates the feel of that community. And it goes beyond land use type, but it comes from having, for lack of a better term, some affordable space where different business owners can interact. One of my concerns was saying we're just going to kind of not worry so much about properties that are not, we're only going to worry about those that are on the historic registry, is that we may end up losing a lot of space. If all we need is Class A office space, we're not going to have affordable space for new folks in the music industry. So, and I think that is part of what has created the history of Music Row. I am by no means an expert there, but it does raise some concern for me, just thinking about, how we maintain some element of affordability in the office space on that area. Again, I know that goes beyond what this is looking at, but some of the direction I feel like we're going makes me pretty nervous that we're not going to have any affordable space left on there. So that was one point that I just wanted to draw out. And I don't know how many of the property owners are renters versus owners, but I'm also wondering what it would be like if we talked to the actual tenants of the buildings. Maybe we have talked to tenants of the buildings, so they're aware of the fact that some of the property could.
When John and others came to meet with us and talked about forming a neighborhood association and who should be in it, and one of the things that I emphasized at that time, that my thoughts was that it wasn't just the owners, that the tenants needed to be there as well and be a part of the conversation. And I believe that they've really worked at making sure that they're there, that they're present. And Stephanie can probably speak to this better than I can, but I do feel like that the tenants have been a part of the conversation.
Good.
Yes, we've talked to tenants. We've even talked to Belmont students at some of our stakeholder sessions to talk about what kind of what kind of spaces they would need. And some of the conversations were, well, if we're going to tear down some of the smaller kind of affordable moldable buildings, and maybe we can have something that's got a communal space or a communal workspace where you can rent by the hour, kind of like these kind of smaller office where you rent a desk or things like that. That's some of the ideas that came out from the conversations with some of the other stakeholders in the group that are concerned about the affordability issues.
Good. Okay, and I had some other questions. So this all started because we were concerned around some demolition, I think on 16th. I think that was the last time we looked at one of the projects, and that's what brought us to this point. And I'm wondering how demolition is going to be treated going forward, because I think that was one of the key issues that we were concerned with.
Well, tonight, all we're really presenting is the policy issues. Demolition and how we will approach that, as well as how we'll approach projects that are using properties that have National Register eligible structures on them. That's really for the next phase of the conversation. And what does if we end up with a Music Row code, then that would be included in that phase. And that's still, I think we've come a long way in that conversation. That was a real pivotal moment, and I'm not sure the community was real happy about our sudden surprise. Hey, guess what we thought of?
Yeah.
But it is the only way for us to tackle these issues about demolition and how do we protect National Register eligible buildings and still allow development. And right now where we are is get the right stakeholders at the table, which is a big piece of what we're still working on. And when we have to wrestle with those hard questions, let's make sure that the neighborhood groups, that the tenants, that the people that are in Edge Hill and the other surrounding areas, and property owners are all at the table together weighing those issues with each one of those decisions. So it's not, when you go to demolish a structure that's National Register eligible, it will not be as easy a path or as quick as a path as it might be for one where there's a non-contributing structure.
Okay.
I don't think that really speaks to your previous issue, but it does to the National Register eligible buildings.
Yeah.
Which
no.
of how many are there that were noted?
66.
66.
So that's a fair amount.
Fair amount of.
I mean, I think the caution that was given to us as a commission that we need to review anything that comes forward very cautious, or carefully and cautiously. That this is not necessarily going to be a green light to go forward with anything. So I think we just need to be cognizant of that as we go forward. I guess the only other question that was kind of a technical, how come we didn't decide to include the existing conservation overlay within the design plan area, since that was something brought up?
Well, it seemed as if the standards that were in place in that area made sense as we were talking about the transition from the northern portion down to the southern portion.
Okay.
So it kind of fit within our thought processes of looking at the current zoning and what's allowed in that, and how can we modify that to accommodate a more cohesive streetscape of what people wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I can see why there might have been some question when, when you think of Music Row, you think it comes all the way down to Magnolia, and we're stopping it most of the way there. So it just, I mean, obviously this is something that can be changed and amended over time, but.
I think when you look at the housing stock that's there, that there's a pretty clear change in that housing stock when you move into the historic overlay.
Okay.
And because it already has, a design guidelines there.
Right.
Protecting those structures, we didn't feel like it was necessary to bring it in.
Okay. I'm going to listen to everyone else.
Sure.
I was not sure when we went down this path exactly where it would go. And I'm disappointed a little bit. 60 properties that are trust eligible going away pretty much, not automatically and not without individualized zoning discussions, because we're not rezoning anything today at all. We're just doing a little plan. And as I realize that it guides us, the plan does, but it doesn't mean that anything that's proposed gets approved. So it is a little bit of an exercise in commercial gentrification to be voting for something that will, in fact, ultimately see the destruction of some of our unique areas, which I am supporting today, because ultimately we've had, how long, 2 years?
Not much.
To give everyone a chance, much like the neighbors on 16th and 17th did when they unanimously approved their overlay a few years ago. Give everyone a chance to figure out exactly what was going on, and to see if they could find it in what they wanted to do for this community or their own financial interest or both, to maybe convert to a conservation approach. That happened, but not very often, as I understand it. The reason I'm supportive of it, in spite of the sadness of seeing some character lost and some definite loss of varying income levels of business owners and renters of commercial property, is because fundamentally, I actually do believe in property rights up to a point. Zoning itself, obviously, is something of an imposition on certain fundamentalists on the issue, but I do believe that if you don't have an area where the majority of folks or where the owners themselves want it, you don't put it on it. We've never done that in Nashville. We've never put on an overlay where a great percentage of the folks didn't sign on the dotted line. 70% used to be a rule of thumb. I don't know what it is now, or if we have a rule of thumb. But as much as it pains me to say I support this, I do support it, because those people who are going to choose an overlay will choose to do that. That doesn't mean that I'm likely to be for every proposal that comes down the pipe. But I do think it is made for a better, more nuanced approach than had we not asked for this timeout and looked into this. And I appreciate that that's been an imposition for certain property owners, and I get that, and it would have been for me too, had I owned property. On the other hand, the overlay, as you might guess, as you've heard, I had a little part to play. And I had just finished successfully rezoning a little strip called Old Blakemore that went from 19th down to what was then the First American National Bank building. And it's still one of the more interesting conversions from residential to office and commercial with an overlay. It was, I think, the first one we had that was a council-imposed overlay with the approval of property owners, which worked. And it's still some fine homes, some fine structures that are used for offices and whatnot. So when I saw how successful that had been and how happy the property owner was with what had happened, I offered to people in South Music Row, I was going to give them a big gift and rezone that into an overlay, and without changing the use, because I felt like the residential use would be good. Well, it was not wildly popular at the time. I think of the owners of the property on South Music Row, maybe one or maybe zero wanted the overlay with continued residential. They didn't want that. So I said, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to impose zoning on someone who doesn't want it like that. Then after a while, they came to me. I had not really thought about the coupling together. I don't think I had. It's been over 20 years ago. Coupling together but changing use with the overlay. But they had thought of it, and they thought it would be a good idea, overwhelmingly, to carve out office use but with the overlay for that area, which at that time and still is surrounded by residential on 18th, on Villa Place, on 15th. So that's what we did. I don't know if it was 100% or 95% or whatever, but it was overwhelming number of owners who, over 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, supported this overlay and have since been, until today, I thought, reasonably happy with what that had done for their ability to rent out space. I still would like to know more about some of that, but the fact is that we carved out an area of strict residential zoning, surrounded by residential zoning, and made it commercial at the request of the owners. And now 19 years later, they are not happy because they think they could make more money. I'm not for that, to put it mildly. The strong neighborhoods around the area and south of the area have appreciated the gradual change from Music Row from the high density at the north end to the low density and lower uses at south end. So I'm very appreciative of the staff recommendation on that part and plan to support the rest as well. Thank you.
Lillian?
I have some questions for staff, but first I'd like to thank you again for all the work you've done. Obviously, it's been a long process, and everyone seems to appreciate all the things that you've taken into consideration in developing this plan. I think the plan does strike an appropriate balance between the various considerations. One thing that was brought up a couple of times, I know Commissioner Farr brought it up too, was the Music Row Code. So this is a first step, correct, and then there's more to come. And so the Music Row Code is designed, or I guess the intention is to address questions like the demolition of the NRE properties. Can you talk a little bit more about the process and the timeline for developing the code?
Sure. The idea of the code, which was just one of the ideas for implementation that staff determined could work and modeled after the downtown code or the Hillsborough, like the different UDOs, and have people so that the community would be able to review the process and see whether or not a building that would be NRE that's on the National Register, whether or not it would be worthy, if it was worthwhile to demolish that building for what we were going to get in place. And so it kind of came as a quick idea. We wrote it up, we presented it at the June meeting, and it kind of was a little too much too fast in a sense. So we thought, okay, well, let's just go ahead and look at the policy, get that straightened out and exactly how we want it. And the plan is to start looking at a form-based code for this area in late January. I'm not sure if that's still what the plan is. And then it's about a 9-month process after that. That would help with the community's input on who would be on the design review committee and what the process would look like.
So, I mean, obviously everyone's been very grateful for their ability to participate, and I'm assuming all of that is going to continue. The same type of involvement with the stakeholders, the community, all of that is going to happen with the design of the Music Row Code.
I think that in developing the code, we'll work with the stakeholders and the potential design review committee members, and then we would have a larger community engagement meeting before we brought the code to the Planning Commission.
Thanks.
Stephanie can't speak as well on that because she won't be here. She is taking a job in the mayor's office, so it's a little hard to throw.
She'll be in Nashville.
She'll be working with us just in a different capacity,
Exactly.
but this particular work product she will not be familiar with.
There's been a motion for her to stay. Second. All right, sorry.
Mayor would be too happy.
Brenda.
Y'all can thank the mayor for that tomorrow.
Saturday. Brenda.
That was great clarification. I had some of the same questions as well. And I think somebody from the public raised a concern about SPs, and this will not protect that yet, but it's on its way, right? So right now, what happens during that time before the UDO or the code gets implemented, will we still see SPs coming through? Or do we still have like a hold on any development?
Well, we didn't, to make clear, we didn't have a hold on development. I know I've had to explain myself on this a number of times.
Sorry.
That all development started with an understanding that if what they were seeking were additional entitlements and it led to the demolition of National Register eligible structures especially, that it would start with a recommendation of disapproval. So we now will have policy that we'll be able to judge applications against, and I think give clearer recommendation rather than have that sort of blunt instrument. We'll have a better way to give you a recommendation. And certainly, if one of those projects that's presented is considering the demolition of a National Register eligible property, then we're going to highlight that and we're going to talk about it extensively, and we're going to lean on the Historic Commission to give us good advice on its significance, its level of significance, and what other options are available.
And Commissioner, probably one other thing, if you have, to interrupt just briefly, and I apologize, is that, we're a voting body, and I think it's very clear that if it is a historic eligible structure, that it would probably have a hard time getting enough votes on this body, so. Not to say that I can count votes, but just.
So only the projects that are expecting or trying to get more entitlements will be going through this same policy process, right?
Well, that's what we're still working out.
Okay.
The exact way, if you have a parking lot on 17th, then we're probably just going to look at the policy and see, does the zone proposal match the policy? And if it does, then we're, assuming it hits all the other notes that we always look for, right? If you're doing residential, we're going to look for, rental residential, we're going to look for affordable housing. No matter what you're building, we're going to make sure the pedestrian environment's, right. And that hopefully we can build in some open space. But we're going to look at all the things that we normally do and make those recommendations. But the policy will be in the background regarding, height and uses.
I think the concept of a code or a UDO, I think it's great. I'm familiar with the UDOs and DTC, and I think having somebody or a DRC, a design review committee, that is involved and sees that community every day, I think that will be great for this area. I think the concept is great as well with the transitioning areas and coming down and trying to get closer to the context around that area. I think that's a great thing to have. And overall, I think the concept is great. I'm excited to see what the code will look like. And I know this is just the first step, but I think it's great. Thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you. Well, all the clever commissioners in front of me have asked all my questions, so I don't have any new ones. I appreciate all the answers. Just to clarify for me, when I look on page 8, I see a dark boundary that goes all the way down and includes what I think is the area in the conservation zoning overlay. So technically, is it still included in this? It's just that the design guidelines from the conservation zoning over prevail there, or is it literally not in there?
It's not in there. This is the area that we were studying during the process. And so the conservation overlay is the safe place.
But by our adopting what's here today, that doesn't preclude further process to discuss that or stop anything. But I mean, we're just dealing with what's in the actual area.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm sure there will be continued conversation then. I've had all my questions answered. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbs?
Well, it has been a broken record, but we do applaud the effort that went into this. Being part of some of it, there's a lot of information, and I appreciate planning also with the partners, with National Trust, and even the Tennessee Historical Commission. And I do in support of this definite first step, because you have to make a first step. As many of you know, this Music Row, we got national attention for how the inventory was becoming depleted, and this community was changing across the country, everywhere. Made a magazine and a lot of attention, because what makes Nashville unique was becoming getting obliterated. So I do appreciate it. And one of the things too is so many people feel like, well, historic is only architecturally significant buildings, and I'm an architect, but that's not true. It's like what happens there, as someone pointed out. Abraham Lincoln's house is not very architecturally significant, but you wouldn't want to tear it down because of what happened there. And what happens, what has happened in Music Row, and this the history there, that you may drive by the building and not feel much to it, but as you see the tours go by, as I always say, just think about the tragedy of people saying, well, what used to stand there was this, and what used to be there, and that's, you lose what's really unique about that community. So I do look forward to the further steps on being able to have some true arms or teeth to it as far as some of the truly historically significant properties. But you do have to start somewhere, and I think that that design review committee will be will be really strong and important for what happens here. And also, I definitely appreciate the National Trust for the, finding out the properties that National Historical, or that are eligible. And true, they all may not get it, but it is good to understand that and understand what the inventory in that area is, because it's very, very important. And it's important to Nashville that we can't just turn our back on what this, how we became, known as Music City. A lot of it happened, a lot of the history happened right there. So I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the further details as we get into it. And as it gets passed off from Stephanie, we definitely keep a watchful eye on it to see how it continues to develop.
Ms. Secretary, Commissioner.
I have nothing new to add. Excuse me. The only question regarding the summary of findings, I was also intrigued by the inventory, and this may be a question for Brian. I can ask him offline. When you have 66 buildings eligible, is that an elect-in? Since we only have 3 that are actually on the National Register, does that just mean they're eligible, but they have to elect in to be on the registry?
Yes.
Okay, I should know the answer to that. My Edgefield neighbors would be very upset with me right now. And the buildings worthy of conservation, 180 out of 389. So almost half of the buildings were worthy of conservation. Okay, so yeah, it will be a really interesting conversation going forward, but it's a really good first step.
Strange. No comments. Mr. Chairman.
Well, there's been a lot of good discussion, a lot of discussion prior to coming here tonight with the stakeholders over a period of time with the staff and the owners, the people that lease there, and a lot of good questions from the commissioners tonight. And so I won't belabor it, but I'm going to make a motion that we approve with staff recommendations.
That's a proper motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Anyone else wishing?
A clarification
Yes.
question, and I
Yes.
think this is kind of following up on what was asked momentarily, and still my own learning curve, but the policy is in place, and like you said, if it's a parking lot, we kind of just look at the policy and make a decision about how we go forward. But if it did come through and it was going to require demolition of even property that was not necessarily on the historic list, we're not bound by policy to say it's consistent with policy and therefore we feel strongly we need to go forward with it. We can think about the broader picture.
Absolutely. And let me say, because of the exercise that you sent us down, or the road you sent us down, our staff reports are going to have the opportunity now to speak to what happened there. Whether it's a log cabin, a parking lot, or otherwise, we're going to be able to give you a much better detailed description of why that property is historic or significant to the area, and then let the commission and ultimately the council make a decision, but an informed decision, which was what the goal was.
Okay.
Any other discussion? We're on discussion.
Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say,
sorry,
I'll be
Steph.
leaving my multiple property documentation form with someone so they can have that as a reference. All 211
You'll
pages.
still be a Metro employee, so we're going to
Yes.
find you, Stephanie, if we have questions. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Item number 2 is adopted. Staff recommendation. Item 6.
I just want to check, is there anyone here in the audience that wants to speak on item number 6 or number 7? These were items that we had slated for the consent agenda previously, and I just want to see if there's anyone still here regarding that item, or those items.
All right, let's try it one more time. Item number 6 or 7, because those particular items were on the consent agenda earlier. Commissioners, so they ended up leaving. Was there a motion to put it back on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, seeing no opposition or anyone wishing to speak on item 6 or 7, I would recommend we put those back on consent.
It's a proper motion. Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Items number 6 and 7 are back on the consent agenda. Yes, the same person did pull both. Yeah, and the motion included both items. So to be clear, item 6 and 7, same person asked to request to speak, and they were not here. So now we are on item number 12.
Item 12 is a request to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws pertaining to the Department of Water and Sewerage Services. This ordinance amends both Titles 15 and 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation on the changes to Title 17 only. The text amendment proposes to delete Section 172840A. Section A creates a conflict with the buffer regulations in the Stormwater Manual for previously developed floodplain properties. The Department of Water and Sewerage Services regulations have included buffers on previously developed floodplain properties since the water quality buffer was adopted with the 1999 Stormwater Management Manual. The zoning code created an unintended conflict with the buffer regulations. The Stormwater Management Manual contains the requirements from Section 172840A and will continue to guide undeveloped floodplain properties. The text amendment proposes to delete Section C. All parks, golf courses, and wetlands that disturb floodplain or floodway are typically permitted but require review by the Stormwater Management Committee. A special standard operating procedure has been developed for reviewing and approving metro greenways without Stormwater Management Committee review. Within Section D, the following phrase is being deleted: Federal Flood Insurance Program, and replaced with National Flood Insurance Program. Additional text clarifies that the department promulgates technical guidelines related to the provisions of Chapter 15. The text amendment proposes to delete Section E. This section is being deleted because the Stormwater Management Manual does not include zone categories in the floodplain regulations and buffers. This amendment replaces the Department of Public Works with the Department of Water and Sewerage Services as a review agency for critical lot applications. The text amendment notes that these revisions are located in subsection F, which should be clarified as subsection F1. Staff recommends an amendment to replace subsection F with subsection F1. This amendment to the amendment to this section clarifies the appropriate title. The language struck through will be deleted and stormwater management will be left. The amendment to this section clarifies the appropriate committee title and makes minor grammatical corrections, as you can see on the screen. In conclusion, staff recommends approval as this amendment clarifies conditions for stormwater buffer requirements. This text amendment will require the installation of public parks or greenways within floodplain floodway areas to be reviewed by the Stormwater Management Committee. Staff recommends approval of the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll declare this item open for public hearing. The applicant is the Stormwater Division, and are they here?
Yeah, Tom Palco's here from Stormwater. And let me say, come on up, Tom, if you don't mind. Let me say that we've met with Stormwater. We've met with them several times. I met with them yesterday on this issue because I wanted to understand what they were seeking to do. And Tom can speak more directly to this, but I think what we're trying to do is clear up a section of our code that seems to indicate that in some circumstances you don't have to follow stormwater regulations, which I think this body knows that we always require. the developments to follow stormwater regulations, and that's what the attempt to do is to just clear up that piece, and the legal department has also encouraged us to do that as well.
Mr. Palco.
Yes, again, I'm Tom Palco. I'm Assistant Director of Metro Water Services, and I'm over the Stormwater Division. The stormwater regulations also keep us in good compliance, full compliance with both the National Flood Insurance Program, which we needed obviously in 2010, and also Department of Environment and Conservation as it pertains to our water quality regulations. So some of the language that's in this section of the code, in our opinion, conflicts with our permit with TDEC from a water quality standpoint. So we need to clear up this section. Again, it's very important that the code and the Metro stormwater regulations work in concert with each other, and we've been working with Metro Legal for the last 2 years or so on a bunch of other changes. A lot of those are in Chapter 15, as we discussed a second ago, but again, it's important for us to clear up those changes. The development community has some concerns about this particular aspect of what we're doing, and we've agreed to have a meeting with them on Monday to talk about these last remaining issues. But we would respectfully request that we move this forward today with the understanding that we're going to have continued conversations with the concerned parties coming up on Monday. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Palco. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the stormwater regulation? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? So this time, we're only going to give lawyers 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding.
I probably won't take much more than 1 minute. I really won't. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Jim Murphy, 1600 Division Street, Suite 700, Nashville, 37203. I represent St. Thomas. We are concerned about this bill. Our primary concern about it at this point is really we've not had any opportunity to discuss it. And typically, when something's before this commission, before you act on it, you make sure that both parties have met and actually had an opportunity to have dialogue. We have been given that opportunity now on Monday, which is after your meeting, so I appreciate that happening. I think there might be some ways to make this bill a better bill than it currently is. And so we'll hopefully can do that at the meeting. But we are opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And there, just note that there is somebody on the Planning Commission, Council Lady, that is sponsor of the bill.
I understand.
Okay, thank you, sir. Make sure, get that out there in the open. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. And Mr. Chairman, you want to go first, sir?
Make a motion to approve with the staff recommendations.
There's a proper motion and a second. Is there a second? Did I hear a second? There's been it's a proper motion, second. Any other discussion? Council Lady.
I just want to give Councilmember Sherry Weiner credit. She has worked long and hard on this bill and knows a whole lot more about it than I do. I am sponsor number 2 or 3 on this one, and I have read through it enough to have read it, which is not to say that I understand all the fine points of it. But I know that she has put an awful lot of time into it and has worked hard to clear up a lot of discrepancies and things that I think needed to be done.
And Council Lady Weiner has also kept us up to date, and I know that I think what Mr. Murphy was alluding to is a meeting that she's setting up to meet with the interested parties on this issue in the coming days. And she has said that in her emails that if it becomes a material change to the bill, that she'll send it back for the commission's reconsideration.
Thank you. And, that is a number one question that we ask almost every meeting, are the water regulations and stormwater being, being applied to each project? And I believe the intent is there. We want to make sure we don't lose that. And I appreciate the Council Lady and all the council folks that have been part of that discussion. So there's been a proper motion, second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. And item number 12 is adopted. And then I have to recuse myself from item 13. I'm going to hand the meeting over to the vice chair. And
You ready? Yes.
My name is Carrie Logan. I'll be presenting item 13. While the Metro Council has been talking about short-term rental properties for quite some time, the Commission has only seen this text amendment come through once at the Commission level. It was to insert definitions into the code, but not to review or recommend any of the standards. And so I'll be going through some of the history and then the standards as they are today. The intent of this bill, though the standards were put into Title VI originally, is to transfer the current standards from Title VI to Title 17. Starting with a little bit of history, in 2014, there was a letter from the zoning administrator that documented the ability to operate STRPs in residential uses. And some quotes from that letter are on the screen now. Basically, without zoning regulations applicable to STRPs, they had allowed STRPs to operate anywhere in where a residential use is allowed. So in February 2015, the Metro Council adopted BL 2014-909, which established the short-term rental property use in Title 17. However, where it was established as an accessory use in Title 17, the standards were put into Title VI of the Metropolitan Code with a separate bill. Those standards have continued to be modified over the years. Most recently, a bill was enacted on December 6th of this year that further amended amended the standards in Title VI. And so the standards as they are right now, some of the changes that had just been updated in Title VI allows short-term rental applications. It gives them an expiration date from when they apply. Right now, there's an issue that some people submit applications but never complete them, which in some cases takes up some of the capacity for the non-owner occupied. And so this would give an expiration date to applications submitted but not completed. It requires that there's proof of written notification to the neighboring property owners that the application will be filed and defines what that proof can be. It requires documentation for owner-occupied permits and what that appropriate documentation is. It requires STRP occupants to adhere to all regulations regarding public peace and welfare and waste management that are in Title 10 of the code, in addition to the noise regulations. It requires parking as established in 1720-030 and clarifies, continues to clarify that no recreational vehicles can be rented for this purpose. It specifies that permits have to be renewed before they expire. The permit length is 365 days, so it has to be renewed annually, but does allow a grace period of 30 days for STRPs that have not had complaints, and allows the zoning administrator to renew those permits. It clarifies that only one Type 2 permit, or the non-owner occupied kinds of permits, are permitted for single-family and two-family homes, or triplexes, non-conforming triplexes, quadruplexes. In the Title 17 version, that is extended to all non-conforming multifamily, so that there can only be one owner-occupied permit per lot, no matter how many units are on that lot. It requires the Codes Department to notify the permit holder of one complaint. The standards before this required 3 complaints to be received before the property owner was notified, and now it is 1 in the Title VI regulations. And it also allows the zoning administrator to revoke STRP permits with reliable information. So what this bill does is that it deletes those standards from Title VI, and it adds the standards as recently modified by Metro Council to Title 17. It also amends the definitions of short-term rental property, bed and breakfast, inn, and boarding house, and adds definitions for hotel, owner-occupied, and commercial establishment, and it's to clarify the differences between those various uses. And as I mentioned, the intent is just to move as the standards are adopted now, to clarify and move those to Title 17. There is a consultant study that's underway, and then when the recommendations are received from that study, there may be a time when additional amendments would be necessary. And because this would be in Title 17, those amendments would come back through the Planning Commission from now on. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the substitute ordinance. The substitute that you have in your packet has minor clarifications to the language of the ordinance that it's intended to keep the meaning the same as it's transferred from Title VI, but it does reinsert some language that currently exists in the zoning code related to artisan manufacturing uses that was inadvertently left out with the original bill.
Okay, I will declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here speaking in favor of this piece of legislation? You'll have 2 minutes, and please state your name and address.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. Jamie Holland, 511 Rosebank Avenue. I represent the Nashville Area Short-Term Rental Association. We'd just like to add our voice to the chorus of the zoning administrator and staff. Recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking in favor? How about speaking in opposition? Please come up and line up behind the white sign. You'll each have 2 minutes. State your name and address.
Hi, I'm Grace Renshaw, a 35-year Nashville resident. Nashville legalized STRs 2 years ago, but this is the first formal public hearing on this law. It's stunning that a property use change of this magnitude, which affects every neighborhood and allows a property owner to open an unsupervised mini hotel right next door without even telling you, was passed as a codes change rather than a zoning change with no public hearing. This ordinance pulled the rug out from under those of us who bought homes here with faith that residential zoning would protect us from having a commercial enterprise next door. So I ask that you look carefully at STR's impact before you pass another bill. The Texas Metro gains from STRs come at the literal expense of other residents who incur legal fees to deal with party houses, can't find affordable housing, can't sell homes near STRs, and have reduced quality of life, safety, productivity, and security. STRs are a zero-sum game with neighborhoods as the losers. Bill 492 doesn't even resolve the major issue with our law. It still defines a use that's clearly commercial as residential. Type 2 and 3 short-term rentals create problems because they're unsupervised commercial establishments. Neighbors must deal with drunks, crowds, parties, loud music, public urination, and lewd acts. Our Nashville Next plan says we seek to create sustainable communities that support a high quality of life. Want to destroy the quality of life and undermine the character and sustainability of neighborhoods like Edge Hill? Keep permitting type 2 and 3 rentals. The plan also says citizens are engaged in planning decisions. Most input for our STR ordinance came from people who own, operate, and book STRs. Other residents had no voice. Give us a voice now by observing Nashville Next guidelines. Limit STRs to type 1 homestays. Phase out type 2 and 3s in R and RS zones. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Harden. I live at 519 Fatherland Street in historic Edgefield. I've been there for 20 years. I oppose approval of this ordinance as currently written. In Edgefield, we have had many type 2 STRs in operation. I live within a stone's throw of 2 type 2 STRs. One is new construction, side-by-side duplex. It's this kind of catty corner from my house. And another one is is in the 600 block, about 3 or 4 houses away. Both are regularly occupied with out-of-town guests. Both are run as non-owner occupied STRs. Neighbors have complained about both because of regular parties that at times are quite loud and boisterous. Both function like mini hotels in our residential neighborhood. I participated in the development of the Nashville Next plan, and I do not believe that plan contemplated areas zoned for residential use would be subjected to a kind of a mini hotel-like business or type 2 STRs. Type 2 STRs raise 2 serious concerns. First, allowing non-owner occupied STRs, you risk hollowing out the neighborhood. Neighbors need to know and work with neighbors. We purchased homes to live in a residential area, not a commercial one. Out-of-town vacationers are not neighbors. They come to play, not contribute to a stable neighborhood. Second, non-owner occupied STRs drive up rent. They make the markets for affordable housing more difficult. This is a big concern. I oppose the ordinance as currently drafted. Type 2 STRs are not commercial activities and should not be allowed in residentially zoned areas of R or RS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Logan Key, I reside at 1411 Fatherland Street in East Nashville. I do share the goal of bringing greater clarity and less vagueness to the short-term rental regulations, but unless this bill is amended, it fails to sufficiently distinguish the commercial and the residential. And let me explain more about what I mean by that. This builds on what testimony you've already heard. Type 2 and 3 short-term rentals allow the operation of a short-term rental without any on-site long-term occupancy, and that is a problem because that land use aligns more with hotels and motels because the purpose of the use is to sell room nights, just like a motel or a hotel. STRP operators consider the occupants to be customers. In fact, the viability of the use itself hinges on a steady turnaround of customers, and that runs directly counter to residential use. In fact, I would argue that it even runs counter to accessory use because with a Type 2 permit, the principal use is no longer residential. I also want to make another point. Today marks the first time you've considered short-term rentals since the adoption of Nashville Next. I have looked over the community character manual. I don't find anything in the community character manual regarding overnight lodging provisions in residential zones. I know there's the 3% cap for Type 2. It wouldn't matter if it's a 1, but it wouldn't matter if it's a 0.1% cap. The fact is that use is not consistent with residential use. It's vitally important that we clearly protect the distinction between residential and commercial use, and that would involve amending the bill to eliminate Type 2 and 3 STRs from R and RS zones. Look, if we as a community want more generous regulations for overnight lodging in residential areas, let's amend the plan, let's get a consensus, and let's have that debate. But until that happens, I plead with you to make this amendment. Thank you.
Hello, Leanne Rod, 712 Sutliff Place. And this July, without our input or consent, a commercial business was opened next door to us, and that's just 10.5 feet away from our home is a whole house, non-owner occupied rental property that's vacant through the week and welcomes a revolving door of vacationing strangers every Thursday to Sunday. And just 1 month after that hostel started operating, our family witnessed 6 naked adults, I will share this with you, with apologies, engaging in sexual activities outside in the broad daylight. We have experienced many sleepless nights caused by music and laughter from strangers vacationing on our otherwise quiet residential street. When you're on vacation, as anyone in a nightly rental would be, 3 a.m. is not an unreasonable time to be outside drinking and swimming with your friends, but it is unreasonable for our family to be forced to experience their vacation with them. We are 2 working parents, a 3-year-old who has come into our room frightened by the sounds from next door, and a newborn who needs all the peaceful sleep he can get. We're currently trying to figure out how to come up with $7,000 to install soundproof windows as some form of protection from the unsupervised and unregulated hostel next door. I believe in the rights of the commercial enterprise, but that they should end where our families begin. A fence isn't soundproof, and there's no meaningful recourse for bad behavior. The vacationers simply check out and go back to their everyday lives, having completely interrupted and disrupted ours. Every Thursday, we're forced to wonder how the latest group of strangers will behave and whether we'll get any sleep. There's a clash of context between vacationers renting whole houses in Nashville neighborhoods and the families who are forced to live next door. Allowing commercial entities in R and RS zoned districts means we're unable to maintain regular work and sleep schedules in our home. When we know better, we do better. And now that you understand the damage whole house rentals can have, we hope you'll keep them out of our neighborhoods. Thank you. Anyone want to see these? Pass them around. I didn't want to see it either. Thanks.
Good afternoon, almost evening. I'm Laura Roast. I live at 4604 Villa Green Drive. That's near Shies Hill for any of my fellow Battle of Nashville history buffs. I'm a former Metro Historical Commissioner and a former staff member of both the Historical Commission and Metro Historic Zoning Commission. I'm a charter member of the MHC Foundation. I have also served a few terms on the board of Historic Nashville. I first started hearing stories of short-term rentals in Nashville a little over 2 years ago, but it didn't reach a real crescendo until this past year when one made itself known very loudly in my neighborhood. The timing is important to me because 4 years ago, I was really honored to be asked to serve on the Community Engagement Committee, the CEC, for Nashville Next. I enjoyed attending the CEC monthly meetings as well as the many public meetings and charrettes I helped with. I bring this up because at no time during those meetings did we ever discuss short-term rentals. We did, however, over the course of 2 to 3 years, receive lots of feedback from many, many Nashvillians about what they wanted from their city. We heard varying opinions about the state of Nashville's infrastructure, development along central arteries or not, downtown development, and so on. But while opinions about those items varied, what didn't vary was the desire to keep the feeling of neighborhoods intact. No resident was seeking a sprawl or creep of commercial areas, period. I never heard one person say that they wish they lived next door to a mini hotel, which is what investor-owned, non-owner occupied, type 2 whole house rentals are. You can try to call them a residential use, but semantics don't solve the problems they cause. Even if the house isn't a so-called party house, it's still not desirable to its neighbors because it can't be justifiably called a residential use if 12 different people show up every weekend and none of them are the homeowner. That's not residential, that's commercial use, and it doesn't belong in a residentially zoned neighborhood, zoned R or RS. So I urge you to support Nashville Next and the work of our committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Ryan Caputo, and I live at 606B Hume Street in Salem Town. Remember in the movie It's a Wonderful Life when George Bailey finds that his beautiful town has been turned into a seedy Pottersville? That hits a little close to home for a lot of us. And as quickly as Bedford Falls became Pottersville, Nashville's residential neighborhoods have been overrun with these commercial properties. Make no mistake about it, short-term rentals, these type 2 and type 3 non-owner occupieds in particular, are commercial. The ordinance you're considering spells that out. Look at the definition. Commercial establishment means an establishment used for the conduct of a business. A short-term rental that's never occupied by anybody but these transient lodgers. How is that anything but an establishment for the conduct of a business? It's not used for anything else. Or like the new definition for a hotel. It describes a hotel, and then it says, accepts on-site reservations. Talk about grasping at straws. The only difference between a hotel and an STR is my iPhone? It's crazy. So we really have to consider that one day Hilton or Marriott might wise up and say, hey, the only thing separating me from an STR is our app and our on-site reservations. Let's just pull the reservation folks out of the building. Let's just take all the reservations on the apps that they already have, and they can skip all the rules and regulations. They're going to wise up and catch this. Finally, read the new definition of an STRP. Is permitted as an accessory use in all zoning districts. An accessory use. Accessory is subordinate or incidental, like renting a spare room in your house when you're away, or renting the house when you're on vacation. But an STRP that's non-owner occupied can't be an accessory use because it has that as the principal use. So please, commissioners, tell the council to eliminate non-owner occupied short-term rentals, call them what they are, a commercial invasion of our neighborhoods. Make residential zoning in Nashville mean something again. Otherwise, Nashville Next was a waste of our time. Thank you.
I'm Joe Hamilton. I live at 305 Mountainside Drive in South Nashville. The suggestion in the Tennessean November the 27th that the private sector can and will innovate to solve short-term rental issues is pure nonsense with no basis in fact. A phone call or text message from an investor-owned STR living in Spokane, Washington, or Canada cannot shut down loud noise. If a visit and citation from the Nashville police can only shut down the noise for 30 minutes at most in actual cases we have documented, what would a text message from Spokane do? Nothing, even if the text alert was heard over the noise. Of course, loud noise is only one of the problems with party STRs. Obscene language, nudity, obscene behavior, such as you've already seen demonstrated with blow-up woman dolls. Another family cannot even allow their children to use their own room upstairs because the windows view the pool in the STR house next door to them. The only solution that eliminates all these problems is to eliminate Type 2 investor-owned, non-resident STRs. Their suggestion that STRs are needed to meet our growing city's hotel shortage, I also question. I regularly have visitors in my research group. Even when no major concerts are in town, I have never had difficulty finding several hotels with space. STRs are important for party groups because they do not want supervision hotels would impose on their rowdy, obscene drinking parties. The article ends with a final false statement. Cities like Nashville must allow STR so that we can all benefit from that prosperity. BS. Only the STR investors are getting rich. The neighbors of the STR have both their quality of life significantly decreased and their home value significantly reduced because no one wants to live next to an STR party house. So many are not benefiting from the prosperity. Residential neighborhoods and the people who bought homes in them deserve to have their rights protected. There should be no businesses like STR hotels in residential neighborhoods. I urge the Planning Commission to eliminate them in R and RS neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Omid Yamini. I live at 1204 North 2nd Street in Nashville, Tennessee. When I first heard about Airbnb, I moved down here from New York City. It started up there before it even made its way down here, and I had already had friends that were dealing with it up there and the problems that came with it. In fall of 2014, I started sending emails to Councilmember Allen. We've spoken extensively. Nice to put a face to the name. So far, I feel like my voice has been ignored and nothing has been considered. As the Airbnbs started creeping into our neighborhood on North 2nd Street, we now have one that I have sent Councilwoman Allen emails about at 1221 North 2nd that has had wild parties with, PAs set up and all kinds of things. One Sunday morning, I walked out of the door. It was the day they were having a Vikings game, and I see this huge crowd of people out front in Viking helmets, blowing horns, and I don't know about you, but this isn't really what I signed up for, to walk out to it on a Sunday morning, and I'm not really benefiting from it. And the thing that I want to share with you is that having had 3 months to do something about this house that I reported directly to you, I also emailed Clint Harper at Codes, I emailed Greg Stiles at Codes. Nobody has done or been able to do a single thing. Right now, you can get on your phone and look it up. I'll be happy to send you the link. They have it advertised. They've got the hot tub advertised. They have it listed as a party house that hosts up to 16 or more people, has 9 beds. Nobody is stopping it. Nobody can stop it, and nobody will stop it until we do it or you get involved and start doing something about it. I would ask you to please stand up for communities and residents that actually live in them and value our quality of life, not for investors who live elsewhere and only value one thing, and that's money. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you.
I'm Janelle Hamilton, and I live at 305 Mountainside Drive. I just have a brief comment. Allowing this industry into our neighborhoods is the worst thing that has ever happened to Nashville neighborhoods. We're being overwhelmed by disruption of people's lives. People who don't get to sleep at night until the other people pass out at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when they can run to their bed and go to sleep. There's obscene behavior being observed by children as well as adults. You can't write that out of or wipe that out of your children's heads once they've seen that sort of thing. And they hear language that is unbelievable. There is a definite loss of safety for your children to play in your own yard because you have no idea who's next door. They're a different group of people every weekend, and you just cannot let them go out unless you have the time to go out and sit with them and watch them and make sure they're okay.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Commissioners, for letting us all speak here this evening. If you're okay or for...
Name and address, please.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
If you're for short-term rentals, you either own one or you don't live next door to one. My name is Tim Weeks. I live at 6101 Haggers Grove Pass in Hermitage. I'm also the president of the Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. We represent 12 neighborhoods east of the Cumberland River, as well as a large group of at-large members. There's no one on my board that's in favor of short-term rentals, especially type 2 short-term rentals, which you've been hearing about tonight. Donaldson is currently experiencing this problem on a significant level. It hasn't quite made it to Hermitage yet, but it's in Donaldson now. There's one street in particular in the Opryland area, Miami Avenue, that there are 10 short-term rentals now on this street. They outnumber the people who actually live there. And a war has broken out literally among people who live there in these short-term rental properties. The noise, the parking issues, it's insufferable. It's like living next door to an animal house. Miami Avenue is an example of hotels operating in residential areas. Type 2 SDRs are commercial operations in residential areas, and they add nothing to the quality of life for homeowners who actually live there. Nashville is tourist-friendly, and we welcome visitors and their money, but let them stay in the Hilton and the Holiday Inn and not in my neighborhood. I did not commit to a mortgage to live next door to a hotel or a frat house. Thank you very much.
Thanks. My name is Leslie Key, and I reside at 1411 Fatherland Street in East Nashville. East Nashville has one of the highest concentrations of short-term rentals in Metro Nashville. The current bill is not sufficient to distinguish between truly residential, owner-occupied short-term rentals versus commercial, investor-owned short-term rentals. The current bill should be amended to keep all non-owner occupied short-term rentals out of residential zones. Non-owner occupied short-term rentals are more like motels and hotels than true residential dwellings. These mini motels diminish the quality of life in neighborhoods by placing the interest of tourists, visitors, and real estate investors above the interest of long-term residents who simply want to enjoy the peace and tranquility of a stable residential neighborhood. Non-owner occupied short-term rentals also diminish the availability of homes for families who want to contribute to a neighborhood. And these establishments pose a variety of intrusions like noise, parking constraints, and late-night disruptions. Non-owner occupied short-term rentals provide no long-term community benefit to our neighborhoods. I'm asking you to protect the future of our neighborhoods by excluding type 2 and type 3 short-term rentals from residential zones. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Margot Chambers. I'm at 3803 Princeton Avenue, and I'm asking you to vote no on this text amendment because a deferral vote carries weight in the Codes Department, and a deferral vote is as good as a yes vote tonight. The impact of this text amendment hasn't been communicated to property owners in Davidson County. It was on your consent agenda earlier, and this is going to upset a lot of property owners if you vote yes or you vote to defer, and I urge you to vote no. This would allow a new countywide zone similar to SP, and it's going to authorize commercialization in residential zones by property right. As we know, the intent, this is going to be similar to an SP for people that aren't familiar with that, and as we know, the SP was designed to be very specific, and it's been watered down. So I anticipate the same result here. Today, our legislation, our STR legislation, allows one kind of commercialization in residential areas, but that's by a permit in Title VI, and it's not by property right. Consider voting no and letting council come up with a property tax relief program for low-income residents that have been hit hard by Airbnb. Don't grandfather permits or conditions. Don't amend, defer, or close the public hearing. Partial permitting will likely draw the unwelcome attention from the state, and that's going on in Austin too. Just vote no tonight. No city has yet figured out how to enforce STR. Having a zoning code change allowing commercialization without enforcement infringes on my property rights. I was invested heavily in a residential area. I didn't want to live next to a hotel. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners, Secretary Sloan, my name is Bill Terry. I live at 4641 Villa Green Drive, which is located in the Seven Hills neighborhood south of Harding Place and between Granny White Pike and Hillsborough Road. It is zoned RS40. What I was going to say has already been said, so I won't take long. I just want to add my name to the list of people who say that the use provisions between these types of short-term rentals needs to be clarified, that the zoning should prohibit commercial uses in residential zones, and those kind of things need to be taken into account before ordinances are adopted. Thank you for your service to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Commission, I'm John Summers, 5000 Wyoming Avenue. I'm here representing Historic Sylvan Park, Neighborhood Association in Sylvan Park. This bill's here because it's been ruled unconstitutional. And you've heard also that this commission really didn't get a chance to consider the standards when this was passed. And I find that really hard to believe because this is probably one of the most far-reaching, ordinances that we've passed because it affects every piece of property and every residential piece of property in Davidson County. And it's affecting affordability and availability of affordable housing. You have some studies here that I'm passing to you that have shown that it's cost, people in LA over $464 million. We've taken 4,000 properties out of long-term housing, and so we've already got a market that's we got more demand than we have supply, and you've spent months with an inclusionary zoning bill, but which would hopefully produce 100 units, and we've just taken 4,000 units out from availability for long-term housing. This commission has the responsibility for land use policy. That's your job. I've sat on this commission. But there's no mention, not one mention in the staff report in terms of the general plan, Nashville Next. Not one. With such a broad, affecting ordinance, it should at least be taken into consideration with the overall general plan and how it affects housing and affordability. I would urge you to defer this bill. The administration, even in their motion to the court, asked for 200 days to stay the order so they could have an opportunity to deal with it. So you have plenty of time. And your own staff has said you're probably going to have amendments that you need to consider because of the codes study. So you really need to give this the attention it deserves. You can see what kind of impact it's had on some people's ability to enjoy their home. I know there's a lot of unintended consequences that we all as council members worry about. I've had this conversation with Council Lady Allen. Cities have dealt with this in other manners than we have, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but we need some time. And the best thing I think you can do is to do your duty to the community and defer this so we can actually have some community input into it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Association.
Good evening. My name is John Stern. I'm the current president of the Nashville Neighborhood Alliance, Inc., P.O. Box 22057 37202. Probably a lot of you don't know because we haven't been up here in a long time, but since 1984, the Nashville Neighborhood Alliance has been helping resolve the challenges that keeps neighborhoods from being safe, pleasant, and relaxing places in which to reside. We have worked with well over 200 neighborhood associations and on issues ranging from animal care and control to excellence in development to Neighborhood Crime and Safety Council, but especially on community planning and development. In fact, we may be well, Stuart's probably old enough to have participated in two general plans, and we did as well. Today we're here to speak about what I believe, and I've already mentioned this to Council Lady Allen, I've talked to the administration about this, and we concur on our approach. This is what I believe to be one of the worst pieces of zoning legislation ever to be filed and to be passed by both this body and the Metro Council. I must say that on the outset, it was pretty innocuous. It didn't look like much. But we're seeing the results in the testimony of the people behind me. Then the biggest problems are with the type 2 STRs. And we are asking that you put in your motion to Metro Council to have type 2s removed from the R and RS district, just as we are at this very moment. A review of the general plan shows no supporting documentation for this. And I think that's the only way you all are allowed to create zoning and planning decisions. That has to be made based on the general plan and substantial plans. When you introduce one or more of these type 2 mini hotels into a neighborhood, as we've heard, Miami Avenue, 10 of these things, you create a situation where these houses will often sit empty from Sunday afternoon until Friday in the evening. And one of the worst things you can have on any block in any neighborhood is an empty house. There is plenty of additional research to be done on this. You could look at what has happened in the state of Texas recently, Austin specifically, state of California, San Francisco specifically, Kentucky, New York. The whole state is now STR free. France, Germany, and my favorite this week, Chattanooga. Metro has requested 200 days to revise, pass, and submit these, but we think that you should go ahead and recommend type 2 STRs be removed from all districts within Davidson County, especially R and RS zoning districts. This is simply the beginning fix for this STR problem. We'll get back information from the consultant on how to maybe better oversee these things. But I spoke with them, and it's going to be almost impossible to oversee what is today 4,500 STR units, up 10% just in the last few months. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope you will save our neighborhoods from this ridiculousness that's been going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I declare the public hearing closed. And we are going to start with Council Lady Allen, since she is one of the bill sponsors.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone who's come, and certainly offer heartfelt apologies for all the sad stories that I have heard. That is certainly not the intention that we had when we started this. Just to give a little bit of history, this began back in 2011. At that point, there were maybe 200 of these things. The zoning administrator had stated that our law was ambiguous, and because it was ambiguous, he did not feel like he had standing to tell people that they could not do short-term rental. There were some interesting sort of things he was pulling in from state law about having to rent for 2 days, but that was all the guideline that we had to start with. So I began with looking at what other cities had done and trying to figure out what Nashville needed to do. And in fact, if you looked at our code, it specifically talked about boarding houses and that you couldn't have boarding houses in R and RS districts, which would sort of preclude all of the type 1s that actually nobody's complained about today. There was better legal standing to say you couldn't do those than what has ended up becoming the type 2. In terms of residential property, nothing said renting for a year is different from 6 months or 3 months or less than 3 months or less than 30 days. And so starting from a standpoint of we don't have any rules here and we need rules to protect the neighborhoods, we began by looking at what other cities had done. And over the course of a year or so, finally came up with a draft, which I took on the road show, 2 different neighborhood associations. And to my surprise, every time I said, here are rules I think we need, the members of the neighborhood association would say, why do we need rules? This is a great thing to do. It just was the coincidence of what neighborhood I'd start with. I have now found the neighborhoods that ultimately said different things. But at the time that I started this process, both the Nashville Neighborhood Alliance and other neighborhood groups, Neighborhood Resource Center, we're in transition. And so they're now in a much different place, and I appreciate the opportunities they provided for discussion and the organizations that they've provided. And I'm certainly happy to continue to work with y'all. Just trying to give some history here. So with that process, I started with, this should be similar to historic bed and breakfast, which was the one kind of group that did have a process to go through. They could have 3 bedrooms and 2 people per bedroom. That's what I started with. And everyone said, oh, that's crazy. It should be more. What about family reunions? So we looked at what other cities had done. Some had no limit. Some went up to 15. If you looked at what was available in Nashville, 12 was about the cap. So ultimately, that's what we ended up with because that was there in the 200 that we had to start with. So this is a learning experience. Nashville was somewhat of a pioneer in this process. Obviously, you know, I love the quote, when we know better, we do better. We know a lot better now than we did 4 years ago when we started this process. So in the end, we ended up with a code that we took around. Again, you know, it sort of ended up being something with everybody to hate. The people who thought we needed no rules didn't understand why there had to be rules, why they had to be taxes. You know, as the neighbors began to be aware of it, they thought we didn't need any of these. Somewhere down the middle, we ended up saying we need them, but we need good rules. Codes at the time thought they would be able to enforce it. Clearly, it has overwhelmed them, and for that, I apologize wholeheartedly. The council has recently sent a letter to the mayor begging for help to get better enforcement. The mayor responded by hiring a consultant who met with a number of council members, with Mr. Stern over there and a number of other people, to try to make recommendations on how we could make enforcement work better. We expect to get those recommendations at the end of this year. And I think out of respect to the mayor, ask for the opportunity to see if we can implement those for some amount of time and then reevaluate. I think that is worth doing if we don't have to waste a lot of time to do that. So with that history given, I would say we implemented this in 2014. The actual taking care of it started in July. We've had a year now to live with it and discover the many shortcomings. I will certainly admit that. There have been a number of council resolutions and ordinances passed to try to respond to the community meetings that we've had recently. And just to back up, there were a number of that's the one request I would make, Mr. Stern, is in your literature about this, there was a lot of community input to this. There were a lot of community meetings. They were well attended. People mad on both sides, you know, trying to incorporate their comments from all directions, certainly trying to come up with something that was a reasonable compromise. So that being said, we have incorporated the latest round of comments from 2 very well-attended community meetings in three bills that were passed, 2 that were thrown out there and received a whole lot of opposition. from the part of the community that is not represented here, which is the owners. We had tried to reduce the cap on type 2 from 3% to 1%. We recognized right away that we didn't need to have an unlimited number of the type 2. We tried to have a cap of 3%, and interestingly, the Los Angeles study that was referenced here, the information that I looked at did show an effect on home prices where they had 6 to 7% market penetration, but not an appreciable effect on home prices where they had 3%, which is where our cap is. I've asked Mr. Rooker to do further research on that, and he's gathering some data, but I think having data on that would be helpful. All that to say, what I've heard today, I think, is a very strong indictment of the type 2 that I think we need to look at very carefully. I think I would like the opportunity to implement whatever recommendations that the consultant comes up with for some period of time. And if they can get the enforcement in place so that these horrible stories that we've heard of can result in revocation of permit, which is clearly spelled out in here, so that those properties are not allowed to continue, that may solve the problem. It may not solve the problem. And I feel like if it does not solve the problem, then we owe these neighbors a much better solution. What you have in front of you today is not a new bill. It is one change, which is to change the definition of short-term rental to try to address the ambiguity that the judge in the case ruled that said we have no rules. He said your definition of short-term rental is ambiguous, and therefore I'm saying all your rules are gone. I think not having rules is a bad thing. My request is that we accept this, we get the rules in place, and then we continue to work on how we can make this better. But I think to not pass this one leaves us with the ordinance that we had that a judge ruled was ambiguous. And there are those who would interpret that as meaning, therefore, we have no rules, which I think is not a good position to be in. I believe that by passing this, we are simply moving it back to Division 17. Again, as we were floundering around trying to figure out how to do this, it started in Division 17. The discussion was codes is probably going to be dealing with this, so maybe it should be in Division 6. So we split the bill in half. There was a public hearing on the piece that was in Division 17. So there has been a public hearing. Certainly, it will, at this point now that's all in Division 17, every change will be part of a public hearing, which is probably a helpful thing to have, I think. So I welcome that new opportunity. So, and I probably will ask maybe to keep my 2 minutes rebuttal at the end if I can. But I think all of the complaints here are absolutely legitimate. I cannot minimize those in any way. I think we absolutely have to address all the concerns that are here, and I'm committed to doing that. I don't think holding this up is the way to further that process the most expeditiously. I think we need to get this definition in place. It's great to get this in Division 17, and then we'll keep working on it. We'll implement the mayor's recommendations, give that a set evaluation period, and then we'll be coming back to this group. I mean, Mr. Summers had said we need time. I think passing this bill gives us time. I think not passing this bill puts us in kind of a position of jeopardy that we don't want to be in. So with that, I'll let other council commissioners speak.
Hold on. Chairman McLean?
Thank you. I needed to leave at 6, but I wanted to stay and have a say-so, so thank you for calling on me.
Okay.
It's obvious that this is not working in some areas. We have in the subdivision regulations a number of duplexes that can be approved within a subdivision for certain reasons. And if there's a whole block of these, I can see where it gets out of control. So maybe if type 2 and 3 are not eliminated, then maybe it needs to be controlled by a number that can be on any one block. Number of occupants that could be in there. The way it's advertised, when someone said it was advertised at a party house, that's offensive, to any neighbor. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint if that was next door to me or on my block or 2 or 3 houses down, how I would feel. And I think there's just a lot of work. Hopefully after the consultant that the mayor's office has hired, that we can revisit this. I'm not going to state a vote, but I did want to have a say-so in this, that I think the quality of life has to be preserved, and right now it's not being, from what I hear. So thank you for calling on me.
Thank you. All right, I'll go back down to you, Brenda.
Thank you. I know that the issue here is far greater than what we're looking at today. What we're looking at today is an amendment, text change, and it's not asking us whether we agree with type 2 or type 3. Whether we do or not, it's not really what we're looking at today, right?
Correct.
So I have to say that I agree with a lot of things that were said today, but unfortunately, that's not what we're looking at. So we can't make a decision on that.
That's not right. You could amend.
What is he doing?
The bill.
Yep. Sir, hold on. I don't have a gavel.
Or maybe I should ask legal, can you give us clarification for everybody here today? What can we suggest? What is our power? What can we talk about? Because what we're looking at today isn't really, what the larger issue is about. So,
Right.
yeah.
So what this ordinance does, it doesn't modify the standards that are already in place in the Metro Code. This cleans up some of the definitions that someone alluded to where the judge said they were unconstitutionally vague. So what this does is it cleans up some of the definitions, and the legal department is very comfortable with those. And it moves part of the standards from Title VI to Title 17. Those standards are already in the Metro Code. So not passing it, the standards are still there. They're already in the code.
Right. So I think having what Council Lady Allen said, that we already have a consultant that's looking at this. I think that's us, like Metro, already acknowledging that there is an issue and that we're trying to take care of it. We're going to try to take care of it because I think it's something worth taking care of. Having said that, I support this actual text amendment we're looking at. But I want to make sure that we do have an opportunity for all of us to be able to discuss type 2 and type 3.
Thank you. Lillian?
That's so much to say. We've heard so much, so many naked people that thankfully I didn't have to see. It's a really hard, it's a hard position to be in if you are a resident on the street where there's a type 2. It seems awful. I can't imagine that it would be anything but awful if you have people who are living their bachelorette or bachelor dreams right next door to you, and you have to see terrible things going on next to you. And even if people are not necessarily engaging in lewd activities, they could just be really loud. You're not really respectful of people who are not your neighbors if you're there on vacation. And I think that the opponents of the bill raised some really good points about you are effectively, by allowing short-term rentals, you're effectively allowing someone to rezone their property as commercial in a residential neighborhood. I personally cannot imagine a situation where I would want to live in an area that had a type 2 short-term rental on my street. So I'm completely there with all the neighbors. I'm glad that we have a consultant, or the mayor has engaged a consultant to study the effects of these and maybe ways we could better control them. I would be really interested in hearing the consultant's results and how a type 2 short-term rental operation could be conducted in a way that's not offensive to the neighbors, because it seems like that would probably be pretty hard to do. But I think that Council Lady Allen's explanation was really helpful. By not passing this bill, it's not getting us to the place where we're banning short-term rentals that are non-owner occupied. It would just be getting us to a place where now there's nothing, and I don't think that's better. Having something in place seems to be better than having nothing in place. One of the points that was made, it was alluded to today, but it was made, I think, pretty eloquently in the comments that we received via email, was that we've had this long National Next process that involved all types of public inputs, and that hasn't really been the case with the short-term rental legislation. And so it sounds like once the consultants' studies are finalized and we get them, that the plan is to implement them. But I'm wondering, is there any type of planned for, I guess, more neighborhood input into what the final, because I think that we're all in agreement that this is not the final regulation of short-term rentals. There's definitely something to come. So is there, I guess, a public input process plan before the final, I guess, regulations are implemented?
So what I would say is, and this has been a work in progress. We had 2 community meetings last summer and responded to those with a number of bills, and I think we would do the same process again in perhaps that amount of time, perhaps less, perhaps more. It may be depending on what the consultant says we can do. But absolutely, we know that we've got to continue this process. We've got a new organized group, I think, that can help inform that process as we move forward, and I'm committed to doing that.
And so with that being said, because I'm not in favor of having no rules, I am in favor of this bill being approved by our body, and I'm also in favor of the consultant studies being released and another piece of legislation being enacted to protect the neighbors.
Thank you. Commissioner Clifton?
Wow. This has been one of the most interesting and informative hearings I've ever heard. And I don't recall, I was trying to keep up with the last few years what we did discuss. We've not heard much here about the ins and outs of this concept because it didn't go through Title 17.
Correct.
So have we voted on this, Doug?
Not just the definitions and the fact that it points you, and Title 17 points you to 6 in the licensing section of our code.
So we've never really had a public hearing on the merits of this.
As to the appropriateness, that's not really been before this body.
Well, I'm somewhat aware of legislative process at the state level where you can't amend a bill beyond its caption. And so I'm trying to figure out, when we say that we can and can't do this or that, we do adopt, we pass approvals with conditions on specific zonings. Does that apply here? Could we craft conditions?
I'll look for legal counsel to correct me if I get off base here for a second. But taking a piece of legislation, first of all, the state statute, the law regarding how much you can change a piece of legislation and that being beyond what the caption is true for ordinances as well. You can't change legislation so that it does something more than what the caption states. But I will tell you that the caption in this piece of legislation is pretty broad. It's
an amendment to amend the titles pertaining to short-term rental property.
Right. So, but I don't think that's the issue here with this body amending this piece of legislation, because A, you're not amending anything. That the council has control over the language in the legislation. What you would be doing is making a recommendation on how the legislation might be amended. So first say that. This body doesn't have the authority to amend the legislation, but you can make a recommendation to amendments. But I also will say it's one thing to make a recommendation about amendments to a piece of legislation. It's an entirely different thing to rewrite a piece of legislation based on no study, based on no community input other than what we've heard today. And certainly I think what we've heard today is moving, but I don't know that it is the full story. And we do often work with the council to draft legislation and to work on legislation, but never have we done that without community input or thorough research before we offered something. So I'm not sure, Commissioner, where you're headed exactly with that question, but I would tell you that as the director of the department, that I wouldn't feel comfortable making suggestions on the fly to completely rewrite a piece of legislation like this. Making a recommendation that we be a part of the work that's done with the consultants, I'm all for that. And even when we get the information back from the consultant, I would say that that needs to be done with the input of the community as well.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because it appears that we have serious problems that I wouldn't put up with one more night if I had my choice. And these folks see this moving on months and months into the future from what they're hearing. It's interesting. From a legal standpoint, a judge ruled that this ordinance was void because it was too vague. Was that what it was?
No, not this ordinance. The former ordinance, he ruled that the definitions were vague.
The one this amends?
Right. And so these definitions are the ones that our office feels like clean up the definition between short-term rental properties and hotels and bed and breakfast and other things like that.
I guess it's an obvious question then. Some of us came in here thinking this would be better than what we have in some ways. And yet it's not. It's better in the sense that it's probably a more logical place in the code. But otherwise, it doesn't change the law. Does this address what the judge wants?
Yes.
He wanted some kind of standards or else we couldn't enforce the law?
The standards were already there.
They were just
And
not. Okay, what did the judge actually say that was so vague that he couldn't figure it out?
The definition of short-term rental property, he said, was vague. Our office has filed a motion to reconsider his decision. We have not received the order back on that yet, but these definitions that are before you today clean up what he said was vague in his opinion.
Okay. If we do not act on this bill, then is there any effect on the existing situation, legally or otherwise?
Do you mean the litigation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, does it, if we decide to defer this, or the council decided to defer it or whatever, it's unclear to me what that means. Does it help or hurt this situation?
Well, we're still doing business as usual. The law that's in place now is what we're still following. So if we adopt or if we recommend approval of the new definitions for the council to adopt, we're hopeful that that will satisfy the judge and that he will find that those clean up some of his confusion.
If he doesn't find that, then he throws the ordinance out and does not allow Metro to enforce the existing ordinance, what is the impact on these short-term rentals?
Well, so I think what would happen is, at least until other legislation was drafted, we'd be back to where we were before we had legislation passed, and then we would be, it would be up to the zoning administrator to make an interpretation about whether 2-night and 3-night rentals were permitted in residentially zoned properties. And I think what I heard the council lady say was that the previous interpretation by the zoning administrator was that they are. Therefore, you would still have short-term rentals, but you'd have them without any regulations.
Right. In which case, this is better from that standpoint, if you're right about what the judge would do.
Assuming you're not in favor of chaos, yeah.
Chaos theory. So that's a very complicated thing to hold in your mind. I am aware of how difficult this has been for neighbors and for council members. unfortunately, have a Facebook account. I don't know why. It just takes up all my time. It just makes me mad. But that's where I first saw our colleague Berkeley attacked. Not so much by folks with your point of view, but people who thought she was a communist for having the 3% limit. That's who's after her. She's not an American because she limited free enterprise. So it's an interesting balancing act. I don't know where that argument would go in court. I don't think it would go very far. And I know Berkeley to be one of the two hardest working council members I've ever seen, and I'm not the other one. She absolutely is. She absolutely is. I have seen her as my council representative work as hard as anyone possibly could to solve problems, to be creative, and I think it's unfortunate to be in a situation where when you try to make something happen, it just doesn't work. And I'm sorry about that. Nevertheless, I'm not real clear what to do on this bill. I know that what everybody has done here today has been very good, because we will never forget it. We will never forget the presentation, and I think we will want to be part of doing something about this now or later. But I guess I'll listen to other folks. What I'm interested in is the narrow issue of, does this passage help or hurt or do nothing, which I'm still wanting to hear a little bit more discussion about. Maybe I'm just dense. Go ahead.
Thanks. Stuart.
I'm done.
Good questions. Can I ask one point of clarification? If this moves to Title 17, the zoning code, does that give us any additional authority to look at some of these things independent from what council is doing? I mean, could we then say we're going to take on looking specifically at the non-investor or the investor-owned, non-owner occupied properties?
I mean, certainly moving it to 17 moves it within our purview, or that's the section of the code where we make recommendations to any changes,
right.
Which we are usually involved in even the improvements to the regulations. Also, that would be an area of the code where we would talk with this body. Y'all would actually speak to the wisdom of those uses in those areas, and we can do that through policy that speaks directly to the Title 17, or then as the zoning bills themselves move through to try to improve this, they would come before this body then as well.
So, I mean, if we go forward approving this legislation, could we then direct staff to look specifically at the question of whether we feel that non-owner occupied investor-owned properties are consistent with residential uses in R and RS5
I feel confident
districts?
that regardless of whether you tell me to do that or not, that is exactly where we are headed.
But that's the benefit of moving it under 17 versus leaving it in 6, because now we have some authority over something we haven't seen yet.
Right, we don't move it, the council moves it, but if they choose to move it under 17, then that gives us a level of review that we have not had.
So that's another benefit to us approving this.
To this current bill is in front of you, yes.
That's my point of clarification. Commissioner Haynes?
So to that question, first of all, if we were to defer this, Council Lady, 1 month, or till the next meeting, which is a month, it's January the 10th or whatever, and anticipate that we're moving it to 17 and that you work on anticipatory changes for us to review, can we not do that potentially simultaneously at the same meeting in January?
Yeah, there's no way we can tackle this problem in a month. I echo Stuart's comments about the Council Lady Allen. There is no one that I know of that digs deeper into every issue that she encounters, and she has worked on this for, it feels like years, 5 years now. So I'm not going to. I feel really good about my staff. but I'm pretty sure that we're not going to come up with some silver bullet in a month.
Okay, to that point, is that sort of the reason, knowing we were making text amendment suggestions tonight, knowing that we had had unintended consequences from the previous ordinances, that we didn't suggest changes to try to correct, especially type 2 tonight?
Are you suggesting that maybe that we have some suggestions that we can make to correct type 2 tonight?
No, we obviously have a problem. We're trying to clear up a text amendment to solve the judge's orders, correct?
Correct.
We knew we had a problem. Could we not have anticipated combining the two in advance? Or was that
No,
too much?
I think that, and the council and the legal department might be able to speak better to this, but I think that given the time that we've had and how quickly we've tried to react so that we make sure that we have some regulations in place, it's been all we can do to get this drafted just to be able to answer the court's issues so that we have some regulation in place moving forward.
Like I tell my children, try not to back me into a corner, and I feel like we're sort of being backed into a corner. And yet, I think it's probably the right thing to do to pass it, because I don't think we have the ability to amend it tonight. Is that correct?
You have the authority. I don't think you have the ability to amend it tonight in a reasonable way that actually has, where we can come up with language that puts us in a better position.
So to answer the questions that are out in the audience, how much time do we think, if we move it to 17 and we have purview then, how much time is it going to take us to, with your staff, to review this and put something in place that protects the people, that protects our city? Is that 2 years like the Music Row thing, which in my mind is not working?
No, I don't think it's 2 years. But I'm hesitant to give you a set period of time right now, given our current workload, because everybody has noticed that there's a lot going on in this city, and we have a lot on us. And next meeting, you'll have 85 items in front of you, all of which this staff has been working on and will continue to work on. So it's not as though we've got people looking for stuff to do, but we will carve out the time. This is an important issue, and we will address it quickly. But to most of the people who spoke tonight, we're not going to do that in a vacuum in our office and come up with ideas and just throw them out there. We're going to want to reach out to the community. We're going to want to do research. And then once we've had that community input, conversation, research, then we would draft something and bring it to you. Being deliberate, being thoughtful is not quick. And I realize that that's often not convenient, but it's the right way to do things.
That's all I have.
Commissioner Hagendeer? It's nice. We're here where we are, and I always say it takes a long time to get somewhere, and you can't get out of that immediately. I mean, everybody wants a quick fix, but unfortunately, it took minimum 5 years to get here. It's going to take a little time to get out. And in all due respect, I mean, we as a body, I've only been here for a year. This has never come before us before that I know of. And we have an opportunity now to move it to 17, to be able to be engaged in the conversation. The mayor has a consultant who's going to come forward with a recommendation. I totally agree with all of the issues, back to the point, but we can't make, first of all, according to Commissioner Clifton, we don't make legislation in this body. This is not our job. We leave that to the elected officials. And they're going to work through this. I have no qualms that everyone sitting here will be appearing at all the council meetings as well. So they'll have lots of opportunities to have input. Moving this to 17 allows us to be engaged from here on out. That needs to be done. And we need to clarify the language that's there enough to get us out of the anonymity issue so that we have regulations. That is where we are. And then we have steps going forward. We will be engaged from here on out, and we will address this issue in a timely manner. But we will not put our planning commission staff, our planning staff, in a position after 85 items on the next to all of a sudden fix something that's been 5 years in the making. So that's where we are. We will move this along. As far as I'm concerned, we will move this along and we will deal with it, but not tonight.
Thank you, Vice Chair, actually, for asking that question, because that's what I was concerned about. So it seems like we can do something if it's in 17, and that's what I think would be good, because, personally, I think type 2 does destroy neighborhoods, just not even listening to it, just reading it. That's not what we want to promote, and with any of our communities. And our communities are, just like with Music Row, our communities are so important. So this does seem to deteriorate it. But, like we've talked about here, it doesn't seem like we can do it, and what we can do it with based on what we've been placed in front of us. So it seems like moving it to 17 so we can be part of the discussion too, and it's not just, out there. We can be part of it, and when we say as our body, if we say as our body, at least I could say if type 2 I don't agree with, then it'll have some resonance as opposed to how it is now, the way as it got all the way around, I finally understand. So, I'm supported to move it where we can be part of the discussion.
Thank you. Can I ask one other clarifying point? The consultant report, that is only looking at how we're enforcing this. It's not looking at these broader issues that we've kind of touched on tonight.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Since you've heard everything, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I would just say I'm perfectly happy for the minutes to reflect, the discussion that we've had and the commitment to continue to look at this. I think it's important for everybody to understand. We're not saying this is the last piece of legislation. We're just saying this is a piece of legislation we need to pass now so that we have something in place while we continue to work on making this better. And we've obviously clearly, been made aware of how important it is to make it better.
So they're not conditions. Can we put something else to reflect in our motion that we want this, to be looked at specifically within, we don't have to set a time period, but just to note that this is going to be a priority sometime in the first part of the year?
Well, the council lady's sitting right here. That'll be guiding that conversation.
But it's our staff your staff that has to do it. But it comes from her.
Well, and tomorrow, during our retreat, we'll talk about, both what we're working on and hear from the commission about the issues that y'all want us to spend our resources on over the coming year. So that will probably be the best opportunity for us to talk about that.
Okay.
Or maybe even Saturday as opposed to tomorrow.
Oh, I'm sorry, Saturday. They all run together.
Okay, so any other comments? Discussion?
I would move approval.
I second.
Any other?
What?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Would that be approval of the substitute ordinance?
That would be approval of the substitute ordinance. Thank you.
Your second still holds. Any other discussion? All in favor? Okay, ayes have it. No, I think yes, you want a hand show? Hand show. Show of hands for ayes. Ask for the noes. Okay, Commissioner Haynes. Thank you.
All right, if everybody could, we're going to check on something, Doug, but if everybody could quietly exit the room, if you're not.
Do we still have someone here to speak on 24A and 24B?
24, okay. 24A.
All right, good evening. Item 24A is a PUD amendment for the Delvin Downs PUD. The request is to amend the planned unit development to add 2.9 acres. The property is highlighted in red. This is just west of Blackpool Road. Staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions, subject to the approval of the associated zone change, and disapprove if the associated zone change is not approved. Current zoning is AR2A. The policy is conservation and T3 suburban neighborhood evolving. The neighborhood evolving policy is intended to create and enhance suburban residential neighborhoods with more housing choices and improve vehicular and pedestrian connectivity. The Delvin Downs PUD, there's some history to it. It was originally approved in 2005 for a total of 154 single-family lots. It's gone through final site plan over the years. Some revisions have happened, but it's still approved for 154 single-family lots. With this amendment, it's adding 2.9 acres to the PUD and allowing 11 single-family lots. So still, the PUD is still only approved for 154 total lots. This is a broader area, if you will, of what we're talking about. The property that was highlighted in red before is identified in the circle. So this is the area to be added to the PUD to permit the 11 single-family units. It's going south here on Blackpool Drive, south of Barnes Road. This is the proposed amendment area. Over here in this bluish color is the current existing platted PUD. Over here in the yellow area, this is future development. So this existing right-of-way that's built to about here would then be extended going westbound. The amendment area here is just the northwest. This is the 2.9 acres that would be added to the PUD to permit 11 single-family lots. Staff recommends approval with conditions and disapproval without all conditions, subject to the approval of the associated zone change, and disapproval if the associated zone change is not approved. All right, so the associated zone change is next. It's 24B. The zone change request is to go from AR2A to RS10. Property is still highlighted in red there on the screen. Staff recommends approval. Current zoning is AR2A. The policy again is conservation and T3 suburban neighborhood evolving, where that policy is intended to provide more housing choices, improve pedestrian and vehicular connectivity. The current PUD itself has zoning of RS10. So the proposed zoning from the applicant is consistent with the existing zoning of the PUD just directly to the east of this area. The proposed zoning of RS10 is consistent with the T3 suburban neighborhood evolving policy, therefore staff recommends approval.
Thank you. We'll open this item up for public hearing. The applicant has 10 minutes to speak, and you can reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal. Please state your name, address.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Joe Epps with Anderson, Duck, Epps & Associates, 618 Grassmere Park Drive. We want to thank staff for working with us on this. We actually started looking at this back in January, and we worked through all the issues with planning. All the departments have recommended approval with condition. Planning's recommended approval with only 2 conditions, and both of those being standard. So we ask for your approval of this, and I would like 2 minutes if I need to rebut.
Thank you, sir. We'll reserve that 2 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Y'all could line up. Thank you for coming down.
I'm sorry, I'm in favor. I'm Larry Hasty, Blackstone Development. I'm the developer, and we are purchasing 2.9 acres from Mrs. Whitaker, who's represented by Ms. Deborah Dawson that's here today. These acreage will cause these 11 lots to be developed on a street that was already designed to just be one loader. I mean, it was the master plan there, as you can see on the drawing. The lots on the left were already approved, and so we're just adding some lots on the right, so it won't be just a single loaded street. We thank you for your time and for consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening to the Commission, Chair, Vice Chair, and the rest of the panel. I'm Deb Dawson. I'm a realtor, and My client is the seller, Linda Whitaker. I'm here on her behalf. She has a ill brother and a foster child that she's taking care of. So I'd like to ask for your support for this this plan. This property has been in her family for years. She's probably like the fourth or fifth generation. And she watched the development of Delvin Downs, and she is quite active and with the neighbors. And the part that we're speaking of in the rezoning is only like a small portion of her property, which is located in the back. It's a wooded area, and quite frankly, it's an area that a lot of the neighborhood children has taken part in making little mini camps, staying overnight, what have you, unsupervised. So with Delvin Downs expanding to take a part of this 2.9 acres will help to build more homes, which we certainly need because there is a shortage of affordable housing in Nashville, as we can all attest to that. So I ask for your approval and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Let's make sure. And anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Sorry about that, sir. Come on up and state your name and address for the record. Thank you, sir.
My name is Chris Feltz, and I live at 156 Blackpool Drive. My property backs up to that. I'm lot 14 there, if you can read it. My wife and I purchased this property, and that was kind of a big deal for us that it wasn't part of the neighborhood back there. We reviewed the plat at the time, and it was not part of the development. Now we enjoy the nice wooded backyard. We've got a big ravine, or not a ravine, but a berm that was placed there for stormwater management, I believe. And it's a stormwater drainway that comes down through there. And I hadn't seen this plan until I came here today, and the engineer met me out in the hallway there and kind of showed me the plan. And I have less of a problem with it than I did, but I do think that more buffer on that back property line would be advisable due to you've got that berm, there's huge, tall, beautiful tulip poplar trees growing in that wooded area. If a 10 to 15 foot, I think is what he said, was on the easement there, be nowhere near enough to protect those trees. You get into those roots and they're going to die and fall soon. And that root structure is what's holding that berm and stabilizing that berm in place. It's, I'm also the president of Delvin Downs Homeowners Association, and this was done a long time ago. I mean, I just think it should stay the way it was set up to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, and declare the public hearing closed. And how about, we'll start, Commissioner Hagendeer, you want to go first? We haven't gone first in a while.
I've been gone for a while. I'm still trying to get back in my sea legs back. This isn't basically, we still have opportunity to review these things as they come along down the road. If the PUD is approved and the zone change is approved, if they're going to do a plan, and they're going to have to come back before us with a plan, correct? Or that there'll be conditions about the plans that they actually put together for the actual property.
So this is the first step in the process. They would come back for a final site plan, and then we would take a look at that.
Right. And so if there are issues with stormwater runoff or berms or trees or any of that, that'll be addressed. That would be addressed at that point.
The final site plan would be the major construction plans of their proposal, and that would be looked at at that time.
So this is just an amendment of the PUD, which at this point.
To add the acreage and show the 11 proposed single-family lots. There are preliminary grading and things that different departments have reviewed, but with the final site plan, each department will dive deeper into that.
Okay. That's, otherwise, then I'm good with the staff's recommendation.
Commissioner Tibbs?
No comment.
Council?
So just to clarify, they're staying at 154 for the total PUD, so 11 houses that were going to go somewhere else are getting spread apart somewhere, or?
So with the final site plans that have come in the past with this PUD, those final site plans have reduced lots. So it still is approved for 154 lots. This is just in a different location with the additional acreage.
Okay, very good, thank you. And then secondly, maybe this is more appropriate down the line, can we say anything about tree preservation, or does that happen in the final site plan? Can we put language in now so that that's on the radar as someone develops the site plan?
They would certainly have to comply with Metro Code standards for tree, any kind of clearing or anything that they would do with the trees, and that would be reviewed with final site plan.
Can we add to that?
There's a certain diameter that trees have to be in a certain type of tree, but beyond that, our tree regulations really aren't going to protect particular tulip poplars or anything like that.
And the areas shown on the plat for lots would be disturbed for lots. So at this point, you're approving this plan for the final site plan to then come back for review by staff that it's consistent with this plan.
So did they give us any options or not?
Not with this plan.
Not with this plan, okay. I mean, I would love the opportunity to encourage preservation of mature trees as they do their development, if there's any way to do that, either now or in the next step.
We can add that to the plan, and you can ask for a survey done and to identify which ones it is that you want to save. But what you have in front of you right now doesn't do that.
Okay, so that would be appropriate in the next step, or
no, you could do
even
that.
do it here.
You can add that to this.
Great, I would.
It would need to be done now for staff to review it at the final site plan stage.
Is that inappropriate? I mean, if that's.
Not if you feel it's necessary.
All right. I mean, I think that's beneficial.
I will say that we have to remain consistent, Council Lady, if we require that for this particular property. It's hard to say it's good for one piece of property and not for another. Now, you all may disagree with me, but we always like to be consistent. Now, that's my.
Duly noted.
We may want to consider that for future PUDs or something, but I think, it's hard to say, well, I think we need to have a reason for it. And if there's a reason for it, then we need to clearly state that. That's my only thought.
All right, I'm going to ponder that as I listen to other people.
Ponder it for your motion.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think I was going to suggest something along those lines, but my suggestion was going to be to move the lot lines from 5, 4, and 3, and 2, so that you have a larger buffer from 2 to the side property line there. It's more of a design, I guess, lot design layout suggestion.
Wait, can you describe that again?
Okay, so the way that the lots 5, 4, 3, and 2 are drawn on right now, I know they have to be 10,000 square feet because they have to meet RS10 zoning, but I feel like that you can redraw those 4 lots so that you can have a larger buffer between lot 2 and properties 14 and 15 on the other side of the subdivision.
Yeah.
Right now, the buffer area is approximately 10 feet, and so I think a simple way for the commission to do that would be to ask that the buffer in that location be increased and allow them to modify.
Right, okay, that's better. Yeah, so maybe increase it 30 feet or more. I think they can make it work.
Well, depending on what the aim of the commission is, just throwing that buffer out there without having any idea where the trees are located seems a little arbitrary. That if anything, possibly giving us some time to work with. I know that my staff is so excited to hear me recommending some sort of deferral, but to give us a chance to work with the developer and see if there's a particular area that might work as a buffer if there's a right line, rather than just saying 30 feet or 20 feet without really understanding the topography right there and understanding what trees we have right along that buffer line. There might be another number that accomplishes
Right,
what we're
okay.
trying to do, but maybe it's disruptive to the overall design of the.
Okay, my goal is to increase it from 10 feet.
Well, there's 85 items, new items on the next agenda. So
Well,
we can't defer to, I feel like it would be irresponsible for us to defer items to that meeting. And so maybe what we could potentially do is, I think, as stated by the person opposing it, is that, he liked it better. He still has a little bit of concern. Maybe we can give them in the motion some leeway to say, ideally, staff, let's try to get some more trees and more buffer and try to move forward instead of, because I think that we can fix this with a little leeway, potentially. Doug, can we do that? I know you're going to say yes.
We were wrestling with the deferrals over here.
So I don't think we should defer it. I think we should give some leeway and say the more trees that we can save, the better, and the bigger the buffer zone, the better. And could we do that?
Depending on, right, and depending on commission's comfort in instructing the staff, as you have many times in the past, to work with the developer to increase the buffer and to work to save the larger trees that are along this buffer area, then we'll work with them and see if we can make sure that there's a larger buffer area and vegetation. The existing vegetation is maintained. And, a lot of that may happen, quite frankly, as we work through the grading plan and figuring out the nuances of how to do that and not lose all the trees. We can do that.
So I would be absolutely in favor of increasing the buffer. That's what the neighbor wanted. Perhaps there's a way for the developer to design it in such a way that works. And so if we don't defer it, are we protecting the neighbor's ability to actually have meaningful discussion about the buffer, increasing the buffer, or are we saying, oh, we'll think about it, but perhaps that just gets lost tomorrow and nothing happens?
No, if you instruct us to make sure that there is an improved buffer area between the existing lots and the new lots on this plan, to work to save existing trees and minimize the loss of the mature trees in the area, then we're going to do that now. Now, it really doesn't afford the neighborhood that opportunity. It means that you're, as I said at the beginning of my statement, it means that you have faith in the staff to be able to work with the developer to minimize the loss of the trees back there and to keep that buffer yard as dense and with as many mature trees as possible. But you're not giving us a specific number of feet. And as I said before, I just hesitate in doing that without knowing more about what the native trees look like right now. Our existing trees look like they are now.
So would it be more beneficial then to have time to have neighborhood input or some type of additional discussion?
Certainly it would. I think that what we're talking about isn't necessarily a neighborhood discussion, but it's us understanding the tree inventory in the area. I don't know that it takes a full inventory of the entire, all the lots that are included here, but the ones right along the existing development. More time would help, but the only thing that I'm asking is that if you're going to defer, not to defer at one meeting, because as we've now mentioned many times, we're under an incredible amount of stress to be prepared for the next meeting. And you should all bring thermos and pillows and be ready to stay till the next day.
Guaranteed no quorum.
I know. Tonight we had everyone here, and so I thought, as sure as I say that, the next one's going to be difficult. But so I don't know the impact that has on the development either. I don't know that deferring it 2 meetings to the second meeting in January, I don't know how that impacts the developer or this project in total. So that's why I hesitate in encouraging the deferral.
Can you speak to that, what that type of deferral would do to the project?
There's already a 30-foot buffer existing on the subdivision in the PUD, and then we've put an additional 10 to 15 feet on our side, which would put the home approximately 20 feet from the boundary line. But I've been speaking to the developer, and we have to do a tree survey anyway along that because we're going to have to provide some landscaping and stuff. So we'll readily do a landscaping survey down through there, locate the existing trees, locate the large trees and everything else. Planning staff will get to look at that, the urban forester will get to look at that, and that's all part of this normal process that we go through on these PUD plans. So the developer's sitting here, and he's readily available and willing to go out there, work with this gentleman, and try to save all the trees we can that are right along that buffer area. He's heard all the deliberation and all the discussion. Thank you.
Stuart?
You know, it sounds reasonable that, from what the last speaker said, that it's very likely to work out according to the perceived need that the neighbor mentioned, that it's not quite as set as this might indicate. It does strike me as, I mean, you know, there's a lot tied up in a project like this when you've been going since January and you've done everything the staff has recommended. I tend to think we as a body ought to go with asking our staff to work with all parties to make this work to the extent possible. That's from a planning perspective, I think that's really all we can fairly do. So.
Jessica?
I have no comments. I think everyone has
Is there a motion?
discussed this.
Is there a motion? Who wants to make a motion? We need a motion.
Move approval with instructions to staff to work with the owners and neighbors to ensure that the buffer and maintaining existing trees is carefully considered. And
it's a proper
included
motion.
in
Is
the
there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
At first, we have 2 pieces. We have 2 items.
For 24A, now
24A, and then we have to do design.
24B. Any motion for 24B?
So was the motion, was that condition on A or B?
It was on A.
That was on A. That was on the PUD expansion.
PUD expansion, okay.
And now we're on 24B. Is there a motion on 24B for the rezone? AR2A to RS10. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. 24B passes. We are on other business. Historic.
We have a report. The Historic Commission had a 3-credit regular realtor course for realtors and developers. They had about 40 people come on December 5th, and it was the reason they did it was to try to have realtors and developers a better understanding of procedures and goals of different preservation tools and an overview of incentives, and to hope to make it all a smoother process.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Parks.
So this past Tuesday, we had a presentation from Hawkins Partners about the Greenways Master Plan, and something that they brought up that I think is very is going in accordance with our Nashville next plan is that they're looking for locations for greenways and parks that are already in existing like schools or libraries or facilities that we're already using or that we already have, so that they don't have to incorporate or get new property. So I thought that was great that they were looking into doing that. And that's it.
Excellent. I don't think we have an executive committee report other than we're going to see everyone at 7:45 sharp. Actually, I'm going to say 7:40. Plan for 7:40, right, Doug? Or 7:30.
There's maybe a couple of you that might want to tell yourself 7:15.
Tell yourself
so that
7:30.
I'm not, Jessica, saying anybody in particular, but yeah, the mayor is going to speak at 8 o'clock sharp, and we're going to have something to eat. So if everybody wants to get there in time to grab a bite to eat and sit down, she's going to, I think, speak to us for a little bit, and then we're going to open up the majority of the time that we have her to have just a discussion like we have in the past of hopefully talking to her about our vision for what we want to take on in the next year, what we've done in the last year, and what our concerns are, and what this commission has heard from the community as the overall concerns. I think is really important for her to hear. Y'all sit and listen, and I think in a very intimate way, because there's a lot of back and forth here to what how the community feels about development, and I think that's the biggest advantage of her coming and speaking to us, and one of the reasons why we changed the date so that opportunity would be there.
And that is in the building?
It is. It's the bottom floor of our main office, the Metro office building, so properly named. And it's Development Services meeting room, which is just when you first come in, just walk straight past the elevators to the back.
And Doug has also sent out already to you guys if you wanted to have something on the agenda. So thank you for responding to that email, and we want to make sure that we addressed any of your concerns that you had. So I want to say thank you for.
Well, on that note, I don't know if we're talking about short-term rentals, but maybe we should add that for a minute.
I actually had planned on texting the mayor on my way home saying, heads up. I think that the commission's probably going to talk about short-term rental.
I think we need to touch on that topic.
And I'll recuse myself from that discussion. So
you just sit and listen and
I'll sit and listen,
not mention anything. So usually I tell you all about the problems with staffing, but I have good news today. We have 3 new planners on board. Jean Burse, sitting there in the back.
Hello,
and
welcome.
Abby Rickoff is here as well. And unfortunately, Dara Sanders is not here. She was here earlier, but she had to leave.
She has no sense in this.
So, yeah, she didn't
She
stick
had
around.
business beyond 7.
We'll make her stay so y'all can meet her on what's the late date? On the 12th.
Maybe I'll bring her around and introduce her at the beginning.
All right.
Early.
Anything else, Mr. Doug, for your report?
No, I look forward to tomorrow. There's nothing I can say tonight that I can't say tomorrow. Or Saturday. Well, is it not there yet? All right.
I do want to say I'll see you all on Saturday, and happy holidays to everyone on the commission, and thank you all so much for all you do, and see you guys on Saturday. And without objection, adjourned.
That was an interesting. That was an interesting one.
Did we miss it?